Hello, everybody, and we're back for another exciting installment of Try to Stump the Old Guy. Let's see, some old business before we get to new business. I don't think that's proper. Let's consult the minutes. Last week, someone asked about the thumbnail, and I gave a long, elaborate answer about the thumbnail, about the picture I took in New Orleans with the Katrina cross, only to realize right after the stream that was the thumbnail idea I had that I eventually changed. That wasn't the thumbnail people were asking about. So the thumbnail people were asking about last week is now the thumbnail this week. After last week's stream, I changed the previous thumbnail to the one I was actually describing, so people watching the stream afterwards, it might make some sense. No guarantee, but try. The photograph that people were asking about last time, which is this week's thumbnail, is Monograph by Robert Rauschenberg. It is at the MoMA. And that is a piece that fascinated me when I was a kid. It was in an encyclopedia that I had. And in the chapter on art, it ended with modern art. And this was, I think the encyclopedia came out in 1976. And the Rauschenberg was like the artist of 76. He had a big hoop-de-doo celebration at the time. But this piece, I think, is from 1959. Anyway, the utter and complete strangeness of that image of the goat in the tire fascinated me when I saw it in that encyclopedia when I was a kid. And so when we went to New York and went to the MoMA, there it was, the thing that I had just stared at repeatedly in that encyclopedia as a kid. And I just stared at it in the museum and just stared at it and stared at it. And to this day, I go through my photo galleries and I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that thing is really strange. Anyway, that was the real answer to the thumbnail last week, which I totally got wrong because I had forgotten which thumbnail I used. Got a lot of plates in the air at any one time. Hard to keep them all spinning. Let's see. No, I don't want to insert an ad now. Now is a good time to insert an ad. Blah, 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 blah. No, it's not. I'll let you know. Thanks, YouTube. So let's get to people's questions before we get started. Actually, there's one other thing from last week that I want to mention, but let me go ahead and do this so it's not just totally disjointed. No promises. I'm going to answer the questions. I answer them in the order that they come in, though the ones at the very beginning are a little bit jumbled. I do get caught up in their sequential. I ask them in the order that I see them. And if you ask me a question and I haven't gotten to your question yet, please don't ask it again. It just clutters up the chat, makes it hard for me to find the real question, or makes me lose my track. If you go back to, if you scroll up to where I'm at, where I'm answering in the chat, which may be up here, and your question's down here, I haven't gotten to it yet. It takes me a while to get to them. Also, please see down here, let's see if I can get better at this. It really helps the questions pop out of the chat, makes it more likely that I will see and therefore answer your question. Also last week, at the very end of the chat, I didn't see it at the time, but I saw it when I watched it back. Wes, I don't think Wes is here yet, but Wes wanted to talk about Battlestar Galactica. So anytime you guys want to talk about Battlestar Galactica, I am so down. We can do an entire 3-hour stream just on that, at least until the first time that you hear All Along the Watchtower, because that's when you need to stop watching that. And whatever ending you imagine for yourself for that series is better than the one they gave us. But up to that point, it was phenomenal. Now to everyone's questions. Hey, Marshall Major. What's my take on the do's and don'ts of pulling two tubes if required to have output PIs, impedance considerations, which two tubes, etc.? Well, you can do it. That's fine. If, say you've got Marshall Major, and it's got 4 output tubes, and you pull one pair of tubes. Well, if you were connecting an 8 ohm load to the 8 ohm tap, you would then use the 16 ohm tap for the same 8 ohm load, and you would need to rebias and make sure that your heater voltage hasn't gone up so much that anything will go wrong. But if the heater voltage does not rise enough to damage the tube, and you rebias for the change in B+, because the B+ will increase with only 2 tubes pulling current, then everything's fine. It's totally safe. As to which tubes to pull, it's really simple. An amp which has two output tubes. One is the push tube. One is the pull tube. We'll just simplify it. So you have to have a push tube and a pull tube. If you have four tubes, one pair on one side will be the push pair, and the other pair will be the pull pair. I reversed that because I'm looking myself backwards. But anyway, so if you need to have two pulling and two pushing, or one pulling and one pushing, whatever, you don't want to have push and nothing pulling. So that's bad. That's bad. That's fine. That's fine. Always remember, that's fine. Let's see. Hey, did amnesia. Don't run a tube amp without a speaker load means no playing on, or don't even turn a head on while looking for a speaker cable. I should just tell you don't do it under any circumstances. If you have an amp which has standby, typically it's safe to power the amp on and leave it in standby while you connect a speaker cable, verify your speaker cable. But I still don't like saying that, because that gives a false sense of security. You think it's in standby, it's not. There are amps like most Fenders which ground out the main speaker jack when nothing's plugged in which case it has a total load, which is safe for being on. You don't want to try to play a loud gig with that thing with no load. So the Fender's style output jack shunt offers some protection. But the real answer that most people need to take away from this is never, ever, ever operate a tube amp without a speaker connected. Make sure the speaker is connected. Make sure the speaker connection is good. Make sure the speaker is working right. While there are technical caveats and partial exceptions, they probably would cause more harm than good. So there you go. Hey, Phil and Catherine Muzio. What is my opinion of headstrong guitar amplifiers? Have I had any on my bench? Also, my view of good and less good boutique amp companies producing replicas of 50s and 60s Fenders, plural. I have not had a headstrong on the bench. I have heard good things from players. I have seen a headstrong on the bench of Chris over at Rift amps, and I thought it had some poor grounding approaches as far as less than optimal noise and less than optimal design as far as how the ground is treated. It doesn't make it unsafe. It just means that I don't think they understand ground well enough. Now, that's one amp that I saw in one video, not in person in front of me. And it is possible with a low gain circuit like most Fenders, and this was a Princeton copy, to make an amp which works quite fine from most players' perspectives, even though it has ground mistakes in it. You have a ground mistake, a ground loop, redundant ground, and that raises your noise floor. But your overall gain is so low, if the noise floor is here versus here where it should be, you don't really hear that. But you get into a higher wattage, higher gain amp, and that same noise floor is higher here versus here. That's when you hear it. So there are things which we do because you can get away with them. So that's where you can have a Princeton that has more noise than it should have, but doesn't really bother the player. Or you can design things to be perfect, even if the player doesn't really discern the difference. You know that you could then take that basic circuit and add another gain stage and still get away with it. So I don't want to disparage Headstrong. I've not played or worked on a Headstrong. From what I saw of one of their Princeton copies, it could have been better built and more quietly built, but it seemed safely and well built, if that makes sense, in terms of you are getting quality. Yeah, there are mistakes, but the mistakes were leveling wired correctly, if that makes sense. As far as my view of good and less good boutique amp companies producing replicas, a lot of the replicas that are available, if you go to Facebook Marketplace or eBay or Reverb, are bad kit builds. If you make one bad kit build for yourself, you've got a bad kit build. But you make 5 and you get a badge made, you're an amp company. And I've seen a lot of fly-by-night companies out there like that, even some that have done well on the gear. They become the flavored of the month on the gear page, but they're crappy. In general, Victoria is always reliable. Carr is always reliable. I don't think they have any direct Fender copies, but they have very parallel things. Top Hat has some great parallel designs to some of those Fenders. And then you can buy one of the amps that Mojo Tone builds. Mojo Tone will make and send you a 5E3 Deluxe, which is quite good. Is it the best possible? I would say no, but I would say it is very, very good. And you can play music with it and be happy with it, even if it's not going to necessarily be the absolute best possible version of that circuit. It's going to be a very, very good version of that a tech could tweak here and there to make it perfect. But there's so many scam artists, and even those who are not scam artists, those who are trying to, they think this is how an amp should be built because they follow the directions exactly, and it makes sound, and isn't this beautiful, and it's got tweed. So with the best of intentions, they think they're offering you a quality product. It's not. So there's a lot to watch out for. So the companies I listed as good, go for them. There are companies I would warn you away from, but I don't want to get into that on this stream. I'm trying to be upbeat and positive. I'm trying. It doesn't come naturally to me, but hey, Mark Frith. I almost said Firth. Almost Firth the fifth to you. Fifth of Firth. Hey, Mark. Greetings from London. I'm fixing up a 61 Vox AC15, a close relative of the one I fixed back a couple years ago. Got a couple questions if that's okay. Of course. He's changed the he's changed the screen resistors to 1.2K. Should I be changing the grid stoppers to 3K too? Yeah. It keeps the arrival time more or less the same as it was. It gets complicated as far as the math goes. But when you have the original circuit, which had 100 ohm screen grids and 1.5K grid stoppers, and you change those screen grids to 1K or 1.2K, you want to increase the grid stopper to keep the time relationship the same. I could either do an hour on this subject or just trust me on this. So if you change them to 3K or 3.3K, which is a more common value, the amp will still sound as you wish it to sound, but the output tubes will be running a lot cooler. If you listened back to the final video on that 62, it sounded great. It's just not going to self-immolate its tubes the way it wanted to from the original design. For those of you wondering, who is this guy? Why is he second-guessing what the guys at Vox did back in 1962, 1959 originally? Vox was very much coming from a design perspective that came from British hi-fi, and the trend at British hi-fi at the time was to use no screen grid resistors if possible, or as low a value as they can get away with. A grudgingly included tiny little screen grid resistor, because for hi-fi thought at the time that could add coloration or compression or something, which are actually things that we like as guitarists, that you don't necessarily want to hear your classical music played back on a deck that was recorded on a Decca-tree in a 1959 tube hi-fi. But they got away with it to a large degree in the late 50s and early 60s with those 100 ohm resistors, half-watt 100 ohm carbon comp resistors, because they were shipping with Mullard and Brimar military-grade IL 84s for the most part. Those tubes were much, much better than anything made today, or most of the remaining new old stock tubes on the market. Most of the ones you're going to find were the things which are overpriced new old stock today were the rejects of 15 years ago. They weren't the good ones. The new old stock stuff has been so sorted through, and that pile's been fished through so much. And a lot of the stuff that's on the market, which is quite good, is stuff made in the 70s and 80s, which, while still being a good tube, is not as good as the Mullards and Brimars that JMI was getting away with in the early 60s, if that makes sense. Hey, Christina. Pardon me. Soldering the eyelet board on an amp kit 5A3. Do I install all the components, front to back wires to pots, and solder all the eyelets, or do front solder, then back solder, then wire solder? I'm not quite sure what I'm. Let me stare at your question until it makes more sense to me. Okay, if I think I understand your question, if I'm building a 5A3 on an old fiber board, I will do all the connections beneath the board first. If all the wires that go beneath the board from this eyelet to this eyelet, I do those first, and I have the excess wire coming up out of the eyelet, and I bend it over and kind of give it a hook. And let's see if I can figure out a way to show this. Using this bit of USB cable. So if this is the wire, I stick the wire up through the eyelet, I bend it over, and then I take my flathead my flat needle nose pliers, and I grab it here, and I do another kink here. I'm not doing it too hard. I don't want to mess up this USB cable. It's brand new. But I press down against the eyelet like that, and then I bend up in a hook. So that is coming right over. Let's see if you can see this. It's coming right over the eyelet from the bottom, and then bending up. So I've got a mechanical connection there that can snip off the excess once that's all been soldered. And then I do all the components, all the through-hole components from eyelet to eyelet, and I populate all that. And then I will do the same kind of hook with the wire that's going to go from, say, this plate resistor connection. Say there's a plate resistor and a coupling cap at this eyelet that's going to go to one of the plate on the tube socket. I'll do the wire there, and I give myself about 2 inches more length than I know I'm going to need when I go to the socket. It's the tube socket, and I get the entire board populated that way. And any other wires that are going from that board that are going to go to the pots, I go ahead and run them extra long. I twist them together as necessary. So I have a layout that I can put that board in place and have everything already soldered on the board for the most part. Things like connecting to the rectifier tube or the power switch and all that stuff. All the stuff at the power end, that happens at the last minute before it gets bolted down. And then I'll do all the pots, and then I'll do all the tube sockets. So I'm kind of working in one area at a time. I can just focus on, all right, here's the treble cap, or the 5A3 doesn't have a treble cap. All right, but here's the going to the volume pot. Here is going, here, let me wire up the tone circuit, all that stuff. Hopefully I answered the question you were asking. I'm not sure. Jay, that is very much art. It's modern art, but thank God it's not contemporary art, because art died right after that, and that piece is unsettling. But that's the fourth version of that. He worked on that for like almost 10 years, trying to find the exact way to present that information. Now, Nikki loves Rauschenberg. I have an appreciation for some of the stuff he did. Other stuff, not so much. But my interest in art declines quickly throughout the 60s and is almost gone as it became contemporary art in the 70s. But Nikki enjoys all that stuff, so I am content to let her go enjoy certain floors of the MoMA or other galleries, and I'll go outside and look at the sky, and she can text me when she's done. And I say, when we went to Centre Pompidou, there are things that we both loved, and then they got into the floor where it's just contemporary stuff that I had no interest in. So I said, have fun, see all the art that you love, take your time. This is your time here. I don't want to rush you. I'm going to go down the street. I'm going to find Una Coca-Zero. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what they called it in Portugal. I'm gonna go find a Diet Coke and walk around the fountain outside, and text me when you're done. So she enjoys what she enjoys. I enjoy not being forced to say nice things about things I don't like. Hey, Marcus. What is a good brand for carbon film resistors, or does not really matter? What would be a good, safe place to start fine-tuning that for feel and whatnot? Well, they're two very different questions. Typically, I used to use Zycons, but Zycons are seemingly no longer a thing, which is strange because it was such a big company. Right now, I'm using mostly Yageo. I guess that's how it's pronounced, Yageo, and I'm using Koa Spears. And I'm sure that others are just fine, but I like those a lot, and I've had no problems with them. What would be a good, safe place to start fine tuning an amp for feel or whatnot? That's too broad a question for me to answer here because I could either say, no, can't answer that, it's too broad, or I can give you a 3-hour answer. So if you can give me specific questions about what you want to change, about what amp, I can give you some pointers, start you in some general directions. But, that's too big a question. Sorry. I have not checked the amp kits from Tube Doctor Guy. I don't know if they're worth it. Ask Brad if he wakes up and gets on here. He might have. The Tube Amp Doctor stuff is very expensive in the States, much less so in Europe for some reason, and much less so in Australia because of trade deals. Not getting into the current trade war nonsense that's afflicting us, but in the States, Tube Amp Doctor stuff is very expensive to bring in, so I use them sparingly. I've not tried any of their kits. I don't try many kits myself anyway, but I have I buy very few things from Tube Amp Doctor just because the price is too high, even just on shipping. Bathroom is not finished, Rusty Mohican. Made good progress on that. Then Nikki decided we had to have a new front screen door to get rid of the old black cast iron security door that made the house look like 1982. So I am almost done with that. I had to remove the ugly screen door, which I hated too, and the old security door. And then I had to fix a lot of the paint around the doorway. We've got a front door, we've got two side lights and the transom, and then it's all done up. And it had just been painted badly by so many people over the years. This was underneath the vinyl sheeting that someone had put on. So I got the vinyl cladding off and scraped all the old paint off, mostly down to the bare wood, some places to a very flat sanded remnant of an oil finish. And I bought the door, and the door is on the front porch on two sawhorses right now. And right before I came in, I'm literally 15 minutes before I started the stream, I was finishing a coat of primer. After the stream, I have one more small half coat of primer to do in certain spots. And then tonight, I'll put on the first coat of some exterior duration satin ghost white, because it matches the color of the new white door, because, try to match a factory finish. And we will have a new front door. And so that'll be done tomorrow as far as the painting and hanging the door, at which point then I'll resume the bathroom. And I've got to work on amps too. So, Mom's doing a lot better, Victor. Thank you. Hey, Christina, what kind of solder? A lot of these questions I answer in every video if you look at the descriptions of all the regular amp videos. But it's so hard to read it now because it's got so much dirt on it. But this is Kester. Let's see. It's a 6040 leaded solder. It's 0.031 inch diameter. I like this a lot. This works for almost everything that I do. If I were doing a lot of tiny board stuff, I get the stuff that's even smaller. And if I need to feed a lot of solder into something at once, I will take it and double it up and twist it. And if I continue twisting that more, then I would have a section that's 0.62, and so I don't have to have two rolls. I have done that. I had 0.62 and 0.031, and I even had 6733 or whatever it is. I don't like that stuff. Way too much rosin comes out. Really hard to clean up all the flux. But I used to carry different sizes of this, and then the prices of everything went up. So I've got to buy sheetrock for the bathroom. I've had to buy screen doors, So if I can get away with carrying just one lead solder diameter, and here's the thing, that roll would last most of you 10 years. I go through one of those a month, so. Hey, pardon me. Hey, Nicholas. What is my take on mixing with guitar pedals with EQ compressors and such? I understand English may not be your first language, in which case, massive respect. I barely speak English some days. I'm not sure what you're asking about mixing. Are you mixing guitar pedals with guitar amps? I rarely want to have an EQ or a compressor pedal. I'm an outlier in that regard. I like to have as few pedals as possible, each one that does something that's very audible. If you're asking that question, I see all the people out there on the YouTube guitar world kind of thing where they're like, and this is my always on pedal, and this is my light overdrive, and this is my slightly heavier overdrive, and this is my lightest overdrive, and it's like 30 different versions of vanilla. I want to have, there's my vanilla, there's my chocolate, there's my strawberry, really distinct things. So, okay, mixing regular stems and tracks and using them as hardware like an analog desk. That's an interesting question. It's going to come down to how powerful a system you have. And how much lag there is, how much latency. When I'm doing this stream and I've got a lot of plugins on my voice, and if I had a guitar plugged in, I have plugins on that, so I can get the compression and EQ and everything live. Because there's a delay with the HDMI here anyway on the video, I'm able to get all that stuff to sync up with 1024 on the buffers, so the largest buffer size that Logic uses. But if I were to be playing this live, I want to have that down to like 64 or 128, 32 if you have enough RAM. Otherwise, there's too much of a delay between when I play something and when I hear something, so it throws me off. In general, I think we're probably 3 years away from being able to do it through a MacBook or whatever in true real time with a lot of effects. It's doable, but how do you hear yourself? Are you hearing all that stuff? Because there's usually some kind of delay versus the stuff, the purely dedicated DSP stuff, like the what do you call it? The Tonex has that latency removed. It's like 3 milliseconds to 6 milliseconds. So I think with the stuff in the computer is great for doing tracking where you don't have to have real-time monitoring of the sound. But I don't think we're there yet in a DAW for live use beyond bare bones kind of stuff. I think right now the stuff that has dedicated audio DSP and effects, and that could even include some of the Apollo stuff that Universal Audio has, where they have those effects with the DSP in real time, basically like the Tonex thing, only it's built in to the AD stuff. So it's possible, but it's difficult to do it strictly in the computer, even with Thunderbolt. But I think what I just said is not going to be the case in maybe as long as 3 years, maybe later this year. It depends on what you're running. I'm running Logic on an M1 with 16 gig of RAM. Maybe the upcoming M5, if you had 64 gig of RAM, would be a non-issue. I'm not sure how they're distributing the different processors for different performances in the computers these days, because it's so amazing that I don't know. I don't always know exactly what thing I should be amazed at, other than the entire thing is phenomenal. Yeah, yeah. When they found Earth and it was nuked, that would have been a great place to end it, and not do the Starbucks and Angel thing, or the whole all along the Watchtower nonsense. Spoilers, sorry to anyone who wants to watch it who did not know those two things. Uh, am I really spoiling it for a show that came out 25 years ago? How'd I get so old again? Yeah, Martin, I saw the headline with the convicted felon goes over there to shill golf courses. Sorry about that. We're not sending our best. We're sending our felons. We're sending our criminals. Should be sending our insane asylum escapees. Hey, Joe, you got the '70s reissue. What you see this? Your question from last week is how I decided to size this for the streams. I used your question about what do I think about Explorers, and my answer, as I recall, was they're awesome, but they're too physically big to gig with for most people. But if you like it, that's awesome. I'm glad you're able to get it set up right. And I got to remember to stay over here so I'm not behind everyone's questions. I don't know why it feels more natural for me to be here. I need to be here. I'm glad that your new '70s reissue is doing what you need it to do. But yeah, set up from Gibson's a crapshoot. Hey, buddy with an H. Got a vintage Fender chassis that's been hacked up to fit a larger power transformer. I can fabricate an aluminum mounting bracket on my CNC. Any considerations for mating chassis to aluminum bracket? Um, I don't think that's a good idea unless you're able to work with very, very thick aluminum. And even so, I think milling would be, well, I guess you would be milling. It would depend on how thick the aluminum stock is, because that's a lot of weight on even a medium-sized Fender chassis transformer. Over time, the Fender transformers often bend and cause little deflections in the steel chassis. Steel chassis, plural, of Fenders. And so aluminum, I don't think would have a long enough lifespan unless it was like really, really thick stock, which might defeat the purpose. But I am not a machine shop. I would ask someone with more metallurgical direct experience. But I don't know how hacked up it's been. I would say you might want to make two plates, or just see if you can just mount the thing using some stainless steel fender washers with some very large. It's a deluxe. Yeah, you can make two and sandwich them, but then reinforce them. And the transformer itself will be reinforcement on one side. On the other side, get some really thick, overly large, whatever it will fit, steel fender washers. Not fender as in Leo fender, but fender washers as in a large washer to spread the distribution of mass. That would probably work, but steel would be better for a bracket if you could have a bracket made. I know you can't CNC steel. Most people can't. But it'd probably be an easy thing for a machine shop to cut for you. I mean, easy as cutting steel can be. Hey, Skeeter Buck. In an ideal grounding scheme, would there only be two grounding points, one the earth ground from the line in, and one audio ground at the input? Yes, ideally, that is one way of viewing it. You would typically want to have the HD secondary, if present, and reservoir cap ground only join the input ground separately from everything else, and not run it on a trace along with everything else. So it would be going to just a single ground point in the amp, But the thing is, to do that, that ideal, you would have a long path from there to ground, whereas it is often actually practically better to design an amp which has three ground points. One at the input jack for everything but the reservoir slash HT secondary, center tap, not secondary, HT center tap, and then the one for the AC. That way you can have the reservoir and center and HT center tap ground going to chassis over at that end of things over by the power transformer. It'll still functionally be fine, but the very slight resistance within the chassis from that ground point to the one by the input jack actually slightly isolates the noise on both sides, because you have a choke or at least a resistor between the reservoir node and the screen node and then everything else. And so by whatever small resistance is in that chassis from, say, over by the power transformer to the input jack area where everything else goes to ground, that small resistance also kind of filters out any noise that might be on that noisy ground. So there's the ideal versus the what's actually functionally equivalent and easier to build and might be better even than the theoretical ideal. All those things kind of depend on the pragmatic. You can certainly do it all with just one ground, and that ground should be as close to the input as possible. It's just so that the entire chassis becomes more effective against RF. That's good, Mark. That's good. Charleston to Anchorage. My God, that's the entire continent. And I'm talking about your weather extremes. Let's see. Did I miss? You got here, Daniel Kelly says, or Bruguera 1960 Plexi clone. I'm not sure what you're replying to with or, but anything that says Bruguera, avoid. Bruguera and Behringer, just avoid like the plague. Terrible, terrible things. Thoughts on DC supply for heaters? Are there specific amps that have integrated DC heater that have integrated DC heater circuits successfully? Yeah, there's tons of them, from the successful to the mostly successful. Even some PVs like the Classic 30 or Classic 50. The Classic 50 definitely has DC heaters on the preamp. It works just fine. The Bogner Shiva mostly works fine, except when the little switch mode power supply fails, but that's not Bogner's fault. DC power supply is always a good idea, especially in a higher gain amp, to include that if you can. It either needs ideally another set of taps on the power transformer or a separate transformer tied, also tied to the mains. Is not as simple to implement as some people think, and people do all kinds of cheats with step ups and buckets, but I think that's asking for failure mode. I'd rather have something very, very simple, even if it costs a little bit more at first. Though that technology is getting better and better, I do not trust a lot of the modern switch mode things, because they fail all the time. And then when they fail, they're not always repairable or worth repairing. They may be $35, but that model that was in that you use may no longer be made, and everything's changed, and you can't get something that even fits the same space or whatever. It can be an issue. But DC heaters as a concept are fantastic, and there are very many good ways to implement them, and then there's some ways that other people do that are not so good. Everyone says Firth. All right, well, good. It is one of those things when you get an F and an R and a TH, just take a random shot and see what happens. Hey, Kevin Cole's got a 77 Ultra Twin. Thinking of installing some 220 ohm 10 watt sag resistors to reduce the B+. Would it be better to install before or after the rectifier diodes? If you were to put them after the rectifier diodes, you would not be able to use the amp because the resistors would burn. 10 watts is not enough. You need to use like a 25 watt, preferably aluminum clad chassis mounted resistor so the chassis becomes a heat sink. But it's much better just to do the 220 ohm resistors. That may be too high a value. You may just want to try like an 80 ohm or 68 ohm, 5 to 10 watt. Between the HT secondaries and the rectifier diodes. That way you are bringing each AC down a little rather than bringing the DC down a lot. Remember, each half of the AC is half the voltage of the main AC, and the main DC out is larger by 1.41% usually than the AC that's present. So you have to deal with a lot more voltage and current, which equals heat, with a single resistor or single parallel bunch of resistors on the DC side, but you can use two smaller ones on the HT side with less of a heat penalty. But 220 ohms seems very large. Hey, Andrew Jeffries. Sorry. My eyes, this is the exact right distance for my eyes to swim. So I saw Jeffries. Andrew Jeffries. Hello, Andrew. What's my opinion on spraying new unpopulated fiber boards with a high temperature conformal coating for a black face Fender clone? I think it'd be totally worthless. Fine if you want to do it, but it's not necessary. If you want to go with a fiber board, go with a fiber board, and it is what it is. And if it's not coated or anything, if it does absorb moisture from the air, you can soak it with isopropyl and drive all that out very easily. But if you have a coating, things can get trapped inside. It's harder to clean. Conformal coatings often become conductive given enough time and exposure to air and the junk that's in the air. I just don't think it's a good idea. If you want a better board than a fiber board, build with FR4 fiberglass. Go ahead and do a fiberglass board rather than fiber board. If you want fiber board, just do high quality fiber board and don't treat it. That's my opinion, which is belonging to me. Hey, Matt Johnson, any advice on using amps with 5881 tubes? I have a local offer to buy a Freeman Dirty Shirley Heavy with low use that has them, but have no experience with those tubes. Anything to look out for? Most 5881s are really 6L6s. They're just a skinnier 6L6. A true 5881 is slightly different, but most of the ones that you see in the wild these days are actually just skinny Sovtech versions of a 6L6. For a long time, Marshall was unable to reliably get EL34s, and so all their amps came with 5881s, and it's very easy to go from one to the other. Just change the bias range. Nothing to look out for. And you may just love the sound with the 5881s. Hey, Greg Drona. Can I explain what's happening in a GA2RVT2? GA2RVT. Channels 1 and 2 go through a network of 5 nanofarad caps and 1 meg resistors. What is up with that? Same thing you're going to find on magnetones, and the same thing you're going to find on the Vox AC30 tremolo channel. It is a stepped filter network where you have 5 nanofarad cap and then a 1 meg to ground, and then you repeat that 4 to 5 times. Different circuits do different amounts of that. Each iteration removes more low end than the previous one because there's going to be a tremendous amount of low end thump at the input to that section, and at the output of that section, all that's been filtered out. Trying to think how deep to go into this. It's really difficult talking about this stuff because I don't have charts and graphs. But think of when you think of a negative 3 dB high pass, is which what we normally talk about. Hey, it's flat down to X. It means it's 3 dB down at that point and then drops off beneath that. But you may have that may look like this. Pretty gentle slope. It's not like, hey, it's flat at 100 hertz and 3 dB down at 80 hertz, and then it just plummets to nothing. There's no 60 hertz. No, 60 hertz is there, just lower still than 80 hertz was, and 40 hertz is still lower, but it's a gentle curve. That's with one cap and one resistor. When you have them in series like that, it's a multi-pole filter. So instead of going, it goes. So that's how you do that. That's how you have a steep filter in a passive circuit like that. And so that's what that series of caps and resistors do. Yeah, Mark, comma. Erie resistors are pretty much a replace on-site item in an old Vox. They're just garbage. They all go way high. They absorb moisture. And if you were to apply solder to the lead on either side, you just see all kinds of nasty stuff bubbling out because those things they're like sponges for all the moisture that's been in the environment for the past 70 years. Now, if you have an amp which has them and the amp sounds fantastic, you may want to measure where they've all drifted to, because on paper, this uses a 220K plate resistor that's actually measuring 270K. And then the next stage has got a 100K plate resistor that's actually measuring 140K, and the 1.5K cathode may actually measure 3K, but you love the sound, but it's noisy because those things also get noisy as they absorb moisture. You can also say, well, I'm going to put in a new half-watt carbon film 270K instead of 220. I'll put in a 140K instead of 100K. So you can bake in, you can lock in the vintage drift that you like the sound of, but all of a sudden you have the same good parts of the sound, but you don't have the noise floor that comes with those old components. So that's an approach that I will use. I don't worry too much about tolerance until it gets over 130%. And then I don't always worry about it. That's when I'm like, yeah, but does it sound good? If it does sound good, I'm like, okay, this 100K resistor is now 140K. That's 40% over spec. It was a 20% tolerance resistor. I don't need to keep this resistor because it's going to continue to drift and it's going to eventually going to fail. But right now, when it's measuring 140K, it sounds really good. What if I put a 140K brand new resistor in there that's not going to drift? Hopefully that helps and that makes sense. I don't like metal films in an old Vox. I like carbon films. And now that the last manufacturers of high quality carbon composites have stopped making them, I'm kind of saving the remaining carbon comps for very old Marshalls and very old Fenders. I find that the Vox is a noisy enough circuit that it benefits from carbon films over carbon comps, and it still has enough magic and swirl and all those goodies, but especially Erie carbon comps, they need to go. And Hunt's caps, and on the very early Voxes, yours might be one if yours is 61 or 62. Those little brown WEMA coupling caps were junk. The gold WEMAs are phenomenal, but the tropofoils, but there's a brown one that they were using before that just falls apart. And if you touch it, it feels like a mummified, what was that awful candy called? Tootsie Roll. It's like a mummified Tootsie Roll, and you touch it and it's mushy and falls apart, and they don't sound very good either. I don't know if it tastes like a Tootsie Roll. Actually, I'm not sure what the hell a Tootsie Roll tastes like. It's not chocolate. Seatbelt of some variety? Where, if anywhere, is there a strong case for using carbon comp resistors on an old valve amp? It's mostly for collectors, but if I get an old, say a 65 Fender and it needs only 3 of the resistors need to be replaced, and all the other resistors are original to the amp, and I think I should at least try to put in 3 carbon comps. So for those who care, it all is of a piece. If I get a 76 Fender in and it needs resistors, I'm not wasting my remaining stock of good 100K carbon comps. I'm going to put in a carbon film because it's just a 76. Yeah. Hey, buddy, with an H, I've mentioned coupling caps make for a cumulative change. If I were to build two amps side by side, same values, different materials, what are the two types for the most noticeable difference? I think you hear the difference most in the smaller picofarad values. So if you build one, say, with silver mica, the other with polystyrene, or one with silver mica and the other with ceramic discs, you'd hear a difference there. You could also say between polyester on one side and so I've been painting when I say polyurethane. I can't remember the poly. I mean, like a 716p is that polypropylene versus so polystyrene versus silver mica, polypropylene versus polyester for film. If you change enough of them, you might hear some differences. It's going to depend on the circuit. You're going to hear more differences in a Marshall 2204 than you would hear in a Princeton because there's not as much gain, the voltages are lower in the Princeton, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, Sash DC, thanks very much. Rebuilding this old 95 PV 5150 amp using 4 gain stages and a few mods, keeping similar sound. Any advice? Well, I don't know that you need to change the ground scheme in a 5150. I don't know if it's possible to change the ground scheme in a 5150 because so much of that is baked into the board. My general advice for 5150 is preemptively change out all the J174 transistors because they fail. There's a ribbon cable going from the main board to the board with the 4 6L6s, which brings the heater supply on that tiny little ribbon cable. Those burn. Those almost always burn. If yours hasn't, it just hasn't yet. I cut those traces on the ribbon cable so that the traces that are carrying the heaters are still going through the board, and they go to that ribbon cable and then past the ribbon cable, then they go and they feed the ribbon cable going to the preamp board, which is fine to have that level of current on the heaters to the preamp. But I just cut either cut the traces or cut the wires on the ribbon cable which carry that heater supply from that board to that board, and then I bring in new wires from the heater secondary to the octal sockets because it's a really bad idea to have the heater current of 4 6L6s on 26 or 28 gauge wire, which is what they have on that ribbon cable. Beyond that, replacing all the electrolytics in the amp. If you haven't already done it, it's time. It's a pain in the butt, but worth it. Clean all the pots thoroughly with some F5, deoxide F5 fader lube. Clean the switches with some D5. And beyond that, it's pretty simple. The things that fail on those sometimes are the pots, often the heater supply for obvious reasons, and then the transistors for the mute switch. Sometimes you need to change all the stuff in the low voltage supply that powers the transistors, but usually it's the transistor that fails and takes everything out. And as cheap as J174s are, just go ahead and change them all out. Hey, guy, no, I don't want to sell instructions and part lists for all that stuff because people would have problems with it and they want me to talk them through it over the phone, etc. I don't have the time, and I don't have the aptitude. I think by the time you're ready to work on a tube amp, you should have worked on enough pedals and other electronics things and have enough of a sense of electronics to be able to follow a schematic. The people who work on amps who cannot read a schematic, I don't understand it, and I don't want to hold people's hands for it. It's not connecting the dots. If it's not just copying a layout or tab A into slot B, or it should not be. And I know that I would anger and disappoint someone who bought such a thing from me. And they would anger and disappoint me with the questions that they would ask me that I don't have the temperament to answer. Um, you know, you have to know your strengths and know your weaknesses. And I am not a very good hand holder. So that's something I've always just avoided. Hey JB, what are my thoughts on using KT77s and an 82 JCM 800 50 watt 2204 Mark II with vertical inputs, tubes or JJs as run through a pair of 12-inch Celestion greenback speakers? Thanks. Well, I think you're going to kill your greenbacks. Other than that, because greenbacks are going to be rated for about 45 to 50 watts total. And you already be pushing that if you had EL34s in there. You go to KT77s, you're going to be putting out 60 to 70 watts most likely, maybe 75, 80 watts on real loud stuff, and your greenbacks will die. Sound great until then, but I don't think a pair of greenbacks are the right speakers for KT77s in a 50 watt 2204. I would not go any higher than 6550s. And if you do, change speakers. It's just the way of the world, man. It's physics. I can say this, it's gonna fail and why, but it's not. I don't have a vote in it. Hey Dan, Bonamassa likes tumbles and silver jubilees. In a blind test, do I think he could, or I could, tell the difference between stereotones and originals? Yeah, absolutely. And I tell the difference between that, and I tell the difference between a Jubilee reissue and a Jubilee. Most people could if they knew what to listen for, or just how something feels. And I know it sounds nebulous, and it sounds like gatekeeping, and it sounds like snobbery. But and I'm the one who tells people, go get a used deluxe reverb reissue, change out the speaker because the stock speaker is bad. At that point, you've got a really good amp. You can go make music with it. I'm very much on this, work. Lord loves a working man. Very pragmatic, down to earth about these things. But at the same time, because I know that I've got a 64 deluxe reverb right over there, I know what they really can be, what the next level up of feel and response is over just a good version of that thing. Once you play the real deal, and you have played the real deal a lot, you can just tell by the way it responds to certain things. I'm not saying that I'm anywhere on the level of Bonamassa as a player, but on the level of seeing how an amp and a guitar respond to each other, I'd say that we're probably listening for many of the same things. Now, for the purpose of that comparison, both the stereotone and the original or whatever are both in perfect working shape. Yes, absolutely. But if the Dumble's got a bad tube, but he can, and so can I, and so can a lot of players. That doesn't mean the stereotone sounds bad. Hey, buddy with an H, I think you're behind in the chat if you're saying polypropylene now. Everyone look at your screen, and it should say live or in red, or it'll say like negative 12 seconds in white or whatever. Make sure you're caught up to have the best experience possible. I'm not sure how great the best experience possible is, but it can be better than being 5 minutes behind. I'm not saying that I'm godlike. I'm saying that I have experience and intention. I was going to say something else, but then I got distracted by noticing Buddy with an H is late, so I don't know what I was going to say. Let's see. I don't know what's going on with Doug Roccaforte. Screamingdeal.com. Sorry. All right. Hey, Michael Fielka. Been tinkering the last few weeks with the Silverface Basement 100 since he bothered me. You haven't bothered me in the slightest. Most of you don't bother me. Just you, Lou. Lou, cut it out. Repeatedly with a weird problem of hum from the speaker in standby. Checked the shield chassis connection points. Checked standby circuit implementation. Changed the power transformer for a new TAD power transformer. Really tightened the screws. Still got the hum. Well, you shouldn't have hum in the speaker when the amp's in standby, unless the amp is not really in standby. It's okay to leave a bit of excess safety wire on. Safe is a little bit of. I cannot talk today. Why can't I talk today? Is it okay to leave a bit of excess wire on the power transformer, say a ½ inch, as long as everything is twisted tidy and not touching the shield? Yeah, absolutely. If you have any extra unused wires, you know, I've shown it and Brad's shown it. You take the wire. I'll do it again with the USB cable. Take the wire, bend it over on itself, slide the heat shrink tubing on it so it comes over here and over here, shrink it down, and then because this is happening underneath the shrink tube can't pull off. And the only thing that could be exposed to the outer world is insulated anyway, and the hot end is down here in the shrink wrap. I hope that makes sense. Let's see, where were we? I don't know if you're going to have short-term dissimilar metals issues. Aluminum and steel are usually okay in the short term, but I cannot tell you. I am not a metallurgist or metallurgist if you're here from rather warm London. Hey, Chris R. Would I consider using wedge locking washers in place of tooth washers for transformer mounting? The idea being they're designed for extreme vibration. You mean like a split ring, split ring, and it compresses like that? I would consider it. Yeah, I use split washers from time to time. Often use a tooth washer, then a regular washer, then a split ring washer, then sometimes another washer, then a nylock. I mean, it depends on what I'm bolting down, how heavy it is, how prone to vibration I think it might be. But yeah, there are certain things where you can use a split washer if that's what you're talking about. There are places where it's a bad idea, like on a pot. The pot casing isn't strong enough to push that split ring washer down. So tooth washers are better for that. But and it also depends on the screws used for the transformer. Like I've had transformers that come in where I tighten that shit all the way down. I get them cranked real tight. I haven't done this in a long time because I learned about this lesson. And all of a sudden the bolt snaps because the metal of the screw, the bolt, was the weakest link and I over tightened it. So I learned how to fish those out of transformers and replace them with a really long stainless steel. Because some of the ones out there on the market are this crappy pot metal that will snap if you tighten it too much. I don't know about two-piece locking washers that wedge together, Greg. I thought you meant a split washer. I'd have to look. After the stream, I'll look on McMaster Car and see what you're talking about. Well, I'm glad that you like Stereotone. Cherrytone. People always get mad at me for saying Stereotone, but Cherrytone sounds weird to me. Well, I think my personal verdict is out on Stereotone because they'll do like 60% of the amp to an incredibly high level, but just really wonderful work, and they'll have crappy jacks, crappy switches, crappy IC connectors, crappy fuse holders. And the transformers, I don't have much faith in long term because I mean, and seems like seems like I'm being cosmetic, but the transformer bell covers all have square, cheap stamped sheet metal covers, and that tells me that they saved a lot getting the cheap stamped square covers. What else did they cheap out on? And I've heard from other techs that they've had to replace a relatively high number of Stereotone transformers. I have not. And I also don't like the fact that Seriatone puts generic capacitors in orange plastic sleeves that say Holy Grail. So I find that very deceptive. So I don't think that Seriatone cherry tones are great. I think they can be very cost effective. And I think with some improvements, they can be made much better. But it doesn't matter how good the amp is if you have to replace the transformers. Because any transformer can fail. Any amp can fail. I just get no sense of quality overall where it matters in iron from Seriatone, Cherrytone. And Nick doesn't like me anyway. So if this pisses him off too, that's fine. Hey, PF. Is there any Thank you very much. Is there any product available for switching heads or cabs with alternative loads? Picture the old car stereo display, any amp to any cabs safely. It is, yeah, they're out there. Contact Dave Friedman and see who's making them this week. It's a complicated thing to do with relays because you have to have a relay that doesn't make before break. Because at no point, or you can do it where you have parallel resistances, which are always there. It is possible to do. It's difficult to do well, and most people who do that stuff want to have it controlled by MIDI or something as well. So there's extra layers to that. I know the people who are still doing the rack stuff, mostly in LA, do have lines for those things, but most of my clients have had no interest in that. If I were, I bet Fryette would be a great guy to get one from if he makes one. I thought about making one for myself just for speaker comparisons, in which case I would get a foot switch with a make or break switch. And so if I'm switching between two 8-ohm cabs, at the moment of switching, both cabs are getting the signal. So I have a momentary load of 4 ohms, and then I would probably also put like a 330 ohm 10 watt resistor in there across that, just as additional safety. But that's for my use, just to say, hey, I'm playing through this vintage 30. All right, now we're going to play through the ET65, back to the vintage 30, because it's a pain in the butt to go over there and move the wire. So it's possible to do a simple one. It's difficult to do, like, hey, any of these 8 heads can feed any of these 8 cabs. It's doable, but it's expensive. The better it's done, the more expensive it will be. So I would talk to Dave Friedman, or see if you can get in touch with Steve Fryette. Just not a big market for that in Memphis. So I could build you one, but a one-off where I'd have to do all the R&D for it. You would not want to pay that rate. Are the first gen Eddie Van Halen 5153s with F logo built better than the current models? No, screaming Dilcom. None of them have ever been built well. None of the EVH amps are any good. They're terrible. The PVs weren't fantastic, but the Fender made EVHs are even worse. Just too many corners cut, and with every bell and whistle, it gets farther and farther away from sounding like the first 2 albums. So, if you want to sound like that, first of all, play like that. Second of all, if you want to sound like Van Halen on the good records, go buy either the Sir or the Friedman 68 variant. If you want to sound like a 5150, only have it be worth every penny and sound really great and last a long time, go get a Soldano SLO 100. That's what Eddie did. That's what he used in the studio. That was what was on stage behind the racks of 5150s. Hey, Nick Romy, working on an old dual chassis amp, power and output on, one of those. What's the best way to deal with grounding and connecting grounds between chassis? That's really tough. I've just had my time with those, whether it's an SVT or some old Gretsch thing. You want to make sure that this chassis safety ground is always connected whenever the amp is on electronically. So I would view it as needing to have a safety ground, which is always tied. And then it depends on how many runs are made from bottom to top. If the signal is just going to the bottom one time from the preamp and it's not going any back and forth for like reverb connections or anything, then you could, in theory, have it be the same ground which ties the chassis together. Or you could do a floating ground, which is what you'd find in like an Ampeg SVT, where the floating ground has one end of the ground reference to the chassis ground through a capacitor. Or you might get away with just a telescope ground, in that it gets very complicated. I would need to have the circuit in front of me to give you specific concrete advice. But just remember, you never want to have a circumstance where the power amp can be on and power wires are going from the power amp to the preamp, even if it's on the bench, but the ground of the preamp is not there, because that's when you could have an issue where you get really hurt. So you need to make sure that if they're connected at all, they are the two shells are tied together to ground, so the preamp will always be at safety ground. All right, we're going to take the first of 2 7-minute intermissions, and we'll be back. I'm running a little bit late to do this. I got caught up and missed the top of the hour. Usually we do it right at the top of the hour. And some of you lucky so-and-sos are going to get an ad from some wonderful, awful sponsor. Hopefully it'll be a skip in 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and skip it. I got to pay the bills, but I don't endorse any of the crap you're about to see. So enjoy. Sorry about that. Had to get coffee. Let's see. Hey, Johnny. Well, I'm sorry that if I crushed your dreams. They're really problematic amps, and people love them, but then people have to pay to have them fixed, and they're never happy to find out how expensive those repairs can end up being. Artificially high most of the time, just because of mistakes that they made. In terms of something that does all those same things, I would look at the Sur PT100 or the PT15, depending on the wattage that you need. I am not a huge fan of channel changing amps because I find that there are always compromises. You might also like some of the larger Friedman Runt series and other Friedman series that have independent clean and dirty channels. I usually find that the clean channel is an afterthought and the dirty channel is great. Not talking about the Friedmans, just talking in general, or vice versa. A lot of Fenders out there have really nice cleans and the overdrives are appalling. I'm not sure of everything that's on the market because it's hard to keep up with all that stuff. But Mesa's always overpromised and underdelivered, but they certainly never undercharge. Hey Louis, bonjour. I have a Marshall JCM 2000 60 watt TSL 602. What trouble areas should I be looking at? Any must-do fixes? It plays and sounds great. Any thoughts on the new Synergy amp? Well, I'm not sure. I don't think the 2000 series 60 watts had any of the same issues with the boards that the 150 watts did. I hope not. If it sounds and plays great, odds are you're fine. I don't think you need to artificially be afraid of anything. Same thing with any amp. If it starts to sound like it's humming more than usual, get it looked at. Could just be a tube that's drifted. Could be the beginning of needing filter caps. But I've not heard from any other techs that the JCM 2060 watts are particularly problematic. So I hope that is the case, and I hope it lasts a long time for you. I have no thoughts on the new Synergy amp, other than I know some of the guys who design the Synergy stuff, and they do really good work, whether it's Dave Friedman, Bruce Egnater. So I have no reason not to think that the Synergies are fantastic. I just have not played one, seen inside one, or felt the need to investigate them further because I'm surrounded by amplifiers all day long. I'm in a weird position, so. I'm not the average bear, in that if I want to hear what a Marshall sounds like, well, I got one there. If I want to hear what a Fender sounds like, I got 4 different versions from 3 decades here. I'm always getting nice toys in to play with, so I don't get gas for amps. Sash DC, you're also in Montreal? D'accord. Got a Maestro Fuzz pedal, the Stones version, with mild wavering output volume, transistor issue most likely. Replace the electrolytic coupling caps to get it working. I'm not sure. Could be a transistor, could be a number of things. Could be a resistor that's just on the verge of going out. There's not much to that, so you change any electrolytics. You left with transistors and a handful of resistors. There's not much. It could be beyond that. Does that one have an output level, or is this just fuzz? If it's got an output level, I think that is actually feeding the output jack in or the output switch. It could be just a bad pot or a pot in need of cleaning. Oh my God. Rebuilding. You're going to have the world's best, you have the world's best 5150. Basically make it a Soldano and you'll be ahead of the board. That's going to be insane. I assume you're not doing the, the channel muting circuit because that's very difficult to implement in a turret board, but you'll be taking all the problem areas out. I have no experience with Framus anything 35 PPT. Sorry, and I have no experience with the Laney AOR 100. Sorry, or if I do, I don't recall. I've only had a handful of Laneys in, most notably one from like 68 or 69 that wasn't a very good, was a not very well copied copy of a Marshall 1987, but just not a lot of Laneys in these woods, this neck of the woods. Hey Colby, doing really well. Talked about that earlier in the stream. My hands and back are doing really well. I mean, I've got a little bit of paint on my fingers, but that's, and I always have. I don't know whether this cut here is from the porch or from the amp stuff. My hands are always getting nicked up. But fortunately, my back's doing well, pretty for the most part right now. Touch wood. Let's see. Getting to the next questions. Hey, Michael. Hey, I'm glad to help, and thank you very much. It's very nice to hear these things. I tend not to pop too much of this up on the screen, and I don't read those parts of the comments aloud very often because it can be a bit too much. The point of this is to answer your questions and to interact, not to tell myself how great I am. But like yesterday, I heard from a player that I've been admiring his work since I ever started playing guitar back in the early mid '80s, and he watches my channel. He found it during lockdown. It helped him stay sane, he says, and you never know who's going to be watching, and I should get maybe nervous about that, or maybe I should be more mindful of what I say. But I just gotta I'm just gonna keep on being who I am, for better or for worse, and it means a lot to me when people seem to like it. But I mean, I don't want to get too far down that, but it's if I think about, oh my God, I can't, if I do this video and this person I've always admired watches it, will he like me? Will he be my friend? You can't get into that. You can't psych yourself out. I can't think about. I've been in a football stadium with 40,000 subscribers. I mean, 40,000 people. It's a huge number of people. I've got almost twice that number of subscribers now. I can't imagine all those people gathered in a stadium. I cannot do a video or do one of these things thinking I am now speaking to, hello, Cleveland. I'm just talking, in my mind, I'm talking to one person. The name changes every few minutes, based on who it is, but I'm just having a series of conversations with one person at a time. And it's the only way I can do this without freaking the fuck out. Speaking of Hello Cleveland, they're doing a sequel to Spinal Tap. I saw the trailer yesterday. Almost didn't click on it because I don't want them to ruin a perfect thing. And it's almost inevitable that the part 2 cannot be as good as the original. In very, very rare cases has a sequel ever lived up to let alone surpass the original. If anyone can do it, it would be those guys. And if one of those guys are watching this, as I said, you never know who's watching, and they are musicians. I have faith in you. If anyone can do it, it's you. But if it's not as good, just don't put it out. Just say, hey, we made it. We watched it back. It was okay. You've got other things. You've done enough. You've done enough wonderful things. You don't need to sully the reputation. It's scary to think about. You guys never heard of a Nordlock? I think that's one of the VPN things that I'm probably advertising without getting paid for. I never know what ads you guys are going to get. I wish I could choose what ads they're going to show. There are certain companies and things I do not approve of, like BetterHelp. What a terrible scam, especially if someone really needs counseling or that kind of support. Anytime I see a channel, hey, this video is brought to you by BetterHelp, I'm like, fuck you. Fuck you. Let's see. I forgot to reset my thing. Last real one. Any amp tech or tech that unironically calls themselves a guru that I wouldn't immediately run away from. I know some people who are what I would consider as close to amp gurus as it's possible to get. And I don't think that any one of them would ever call themselves a guru, even ironically. I certainly don't. So I think in general, when someone calls themselves the anything guru, run, especially if it's the Love Guru, because that's a terrible, terrible movie. But yeah, I think guru should never be used lightly and should never be used when describing oneself for anything. I'm a procrastination guru, and I'll tell you about it tomorrow. Whisperer, yeah. I'm the amp shouter. Fix yourself! Fix yourself, god damn it! It never works. I'm sorry that your neck's all messed up, Brad. Whatever you did, don't do it again. How is the quality of Mojitone's fiber board? Or is their epoxy boards a better value than always terminal strips? Their fiber boards are just as good as Fender's fiber boards were. It's fiber board, no big deal. They're fine. Anytime you can use a epoxy or FR4, just epoxy impregnated fiberglass board, yeah, it's a better thing to do. But for certain things, it's less practical. It's really hard to fit a fiberglass board inside, say, a 5E3 Deluxe chassis. It's doable. I'm going to do it myself, but it is physically trickier to do. But yeah, they're fine quality. Terminal strips can be tricky. You have a lot more wires involved with terminal strips. Okay, Brad says he has had the TSL 602 PCB become conductive. Well, shit, I am sorry. I've not had that model in, and I've not heard as much about that as on the hundreds and 50s. I've certainly had hundreds and 50s that were effed from the factory. And, 17 revisions of fucking it up, and then on the 20th they finally get it right, and then they stop making them, and they stop selling them. What a great corporate scheme that was. About Friedman's, for a guy who wants to be out of the way of keys, bass, kick, and drum, and plays clean breakup to 2-level drive, Pink Taco or Little Sister, another low wattage old school amp. Well, Kung Fu Sea Dog, sorry, spacing is helpful. I would call Dave Friedman or email Dave Friedman and ask him what he thinks, because he knows his models and why he made them different, and I can't keep track of them because the names don't correlate to a circuit in my head. 2-level drive, is to me a Marshall with an overdrive pedal in front of it. And breakup clean can be the same amp with the overdrive pedal turned off and or the volume rolled off on the guitar. But you can get that general sound out of a lot of amps. You get that general sound range out of an AC-15. But if you want to go with Friedman, that's a really good choice. But call Dave, and he'll know. Dave can tell you a lot more about his amps than I can tell you about his amps. I can tell you about the amps of his that I've had in that I've worked on, but I've only had like 4 models. He's had all of them on his bench multiple times. He's had all of them floating around in his head, which is a much more familiar way to know that stuff. Yeah, I bet the JEL would be a good choice. I mean, there's a lot of things that will do better gain than a Mesa. Tons of amps will do better gain than a Mesa. The trick with the Mark V is that it also has a very noisy clean that people want to love, and they tell themselves that they love it, and they ignore the noise. So I'd almost rather have like a 20 watt JEL 20 and a deluxe reverb and just an AB box. There's my dirty amp. There's my clean amp, and they're about the same relative levels, and that's a good rig there, as opposed to trying to get that all in one 1x12. Also, a Mark V combo 1x12 is heavy as hell. Hey, Sebastian, what is the difference between a good and a poor buffer? A good buffer, the goal of a good buffer, is you plug your guitar into your amp with a 20-foot cable. And that is what it sounds like. And then you plug the guitar with the same 20-foot cable into the buffer, and then the buffer goes to all your pedals, and then to a 40-foot cable, then to the amp. And it should sound and feel just about as exactly like plugging straight into the amp with the 20-foot cable as possible. So no noise added, no level change, no coloration, so that no matter how many pedals you're using, or how far away the amp is from your pedal board, it still sounds, with all the pedals off, like plugging your guitar straight into the amp with the 20-foot cable. Now the pedals can, not all pedals are created equal when it comes to being quiet when they're turned off. But let's take all the noisy, hissy digital pedals out of the equation. Just say that you're running your guitar into a buffer. Your buffer then goes into an overdrive pedal, a Boss delay pedal, and a Boss chorus pedal, and then 40 feet to your amp. Well, you may or may not even need a buffer pedal because the Boss pedal's got a buffer in its output. The buffer pedal that I use that I like a lot, that I'd recommend to most players who don't need anything esoteric, is the buffer in the Polytune 3. The Polytune 3 has got a very good sounding buffer in it. You can turn the buffer off if you want. It sounds good. I used to design and sell buffers. It's a nice sounding buffer. And by nice sounding, I mean it does what it says on the tin. It doesn't do anything except if you know how to design electronics, you know what a nice trick that is, that it actually doesn't do anything. It's as close to a transparent buffer as you're likely to get without spending $200 just on a buffer, and it's built into a $100 tuner. So when they do things right, I like to call them out, and TC did a great job on that. It's a very nice tuner as well. Lots of bad buffers out there change the load on your pickups, so your sound changes, or they introduce noise, or they introduce coloration. Like the buffer in the Klon pedal, that no one watching probably can afford a Klon pedal these days, which is probably a good thing because it's a very nasal sounding overdrive with a terrible sounding noisy buffer. And Guten Nacht, Guten Tag, depending on what time it is there. Mark is smoking the beef ribs today. That's cool, man. It's just so hard to get them lit. Yeah, Empire is almost the rare exception to the sequels. can't rules. But it's really weird to me if you think about it, and maybe we shouldn't get too far into this because you pull my string and I'll do Star Wars. But Empire is entirely different than Star Wars, and by Star Wars I mean what's now called A New Hope. They're very different movies with very different feels and goals and tones. And they're the only two Star Wars movies. Jedi has got about 2/3 of it that are really good, and it's got a teddy bear's picnic that keeps attacking the main film. And they did not have anything to do with Han and Leia, so they're, you know, all the ideas were about Luke and Vader, and then Han and Leia are just kind of there. They're included. Ford was totally right. They should have killed Han Solo, given him a purpose, but a special purpose. But yeah, Empire. It's like, yeah, Star Wars was great. Let's do something totally different, and it worked, and it worked amazingly well, but for entirely different reasons. And you can't compare the two. There are two different experiences, two different things that you look for in a movie. It's amazing. It shouldn't have worked. Meryl's there to bring me down to earth. Smell the Glove was an awesome follow-up to Break Like the Wind. Yeah, but none of them really matched the glory that was Shark Sandwich. Man, I don't know who would be giving you the ads, Wes, but I know that I'd be getting the money, not Google. The the Googles is paying us a lot less than they used to. I have more and more views and more subscribers now than ever, and I'm making less money than I did 6 months ago. And I've seen a lot of YouTubers saying the same thing. And I don't know what we can do because it's Google. You know, I'd say we could do a class action, but I ain't got none. So class, that is. But if I could choose ads, it would certainly not be whatever the crap ads you were getting. PragerU, ugh. I don't know. I don't know what context brought forth this comment, Hans, but I applaud it. Hey, Mark's got a 64 Tremolux AB173. He just wanted us to know that. He's just bragging. Nice amp. Replace the blown output transformer, which has 4, 8, and 16 ohm taps. Okay, is there a second part? Or are you just saying that you replace it with one? I don't see a question there. I'll look and see if there's a follow-up question to that. I don't know where the procrastinator is coming from either. Did I misspeak earlier instead of saying procrastinator? Tell me later. Hey, sent to me. Considering buying an early 50s Marshall 850 watt. Good, inherently bad, a little ugly, but can be a winner. Thanks a bunch. It depends on the model. If you're talking about a 1987, sure, that's great. If it's early 80s, 83 and earlier is going to be a vertical input. After that's going to be horizontal input. The horizontal inputs aren't as good as the vertical because all the pots are connected to the circuit board rather than on wires, which means that those solder joints are prone to breakage. Very easy to reflow them, but it's just something that happens a lot. You have to reflow the pots every couple of years. And they are missing one filter cap in comparison to the pre-83 circuit, and I think that negatively affects the feel of the horizontal input 800s. But if you're talking about a split channel reverb, avoid those. Those are noisy kind of bad things. Yeah, I have YouTube Premium myself. I know a lot of you guys do. I get enough from YouTube that I pay for it, and I don't have cable, so I enjoy YouTube overall. And is this thing on? Okay. Sorry. Is this still up and running? Everyone's still there? All right. Yeah, we had a power surge, and all of a sudden things went a bit wonky. I'm not sure what happened, but good to know that it didn't just end the stream, because some channels you see this they have to stop and start a new stream and all that. This is the first time that's happened here, but it is Memphis, and the wall voltage now is 116. I bet at the time, if I had looked at the thing when it happened, it probably was like at 105 or something. I've got a safe range on this device that takes the wall voltage from one outlet, which is grounded, and powers all these things, at least the crucial things. If it drops below 100 volts, or if it goes over 127 volts, it stops everything. So I can't have things fry. And that's the first time that's affected everything. All right. So okay, good. I didn't even miss the old. Uh, I have to scroll back up to where we were, but I didn't lose the old messages. That's good. Tor, the difference between a super bass and a super lead is about 7 components. Yeah, if you want a super lead, you can buy a super bass, mod it. You may want to watch the video that I'm about to do on this super bass, where I'm bringing it closer to the super lead, but there's some things we will not be doing because it can be way too bright. If you're not playing a Coliseum with the damn thing on 7, which most people are not these days, it's too bright otherwise. So stay tuned to see more of these, and you'll be much happier. Well, KWGM, I hope you're doing all right. Welcome back. Surgeries and rehab and stuff can certainly wear you down, and I'm glad to see you back, and hope you're doing well. And Sash DC, I did see your follow-up comment on the build you're doing to make a real 5150. 5150. Let's see, next question. Yeah, Head First has got some stuff you might want to look into, to whoever is asking the original question about what's a good replacement for the Mark V. And I apologize, Jason, if you see this. It did not pop in my head for some reason, but Jason Head First has the Alta 100, which does everything the Mesa promises, but it actually does it, and it does it right, and it's much better, much better built, much better sounding, and much better designed. Let's see. 12-watt stack traded in the 75 YBA. Hope that works out well for you. Any experience with the orange OR15? Looking for something for the range of punk sound. I think replacements to Bad Religion to the Hold Steady. Well, I know this. In this case, I can tell you that Steve in the Hold Steady is using an orange something or other. I could ask him what it is, and he's got an AC15 custom that I did for him, and here in town, and he's got one in the locker when they do their gigs in New York. That's what Steve's using the Hold Steady, He's got some kind of orange thing. I don't remember what the orange thing is, but he's got AC15 custom. But replacements to Bad Religion hold steady. I don't think those are punk. Replacements were just stones who couldn't even tune. Bad Religion is a little too professional to be punk. The Hold Steady is just a postmodern melange. Punk is Steve Jones with a Les Paul custom into some cranked silver-faced twins. You know, just big, loud, obnoxious stuff. But I'm old, man. I'll ask Steve if you want. I'll ask Steve what he's using in the Hold Steady. But I would say for any of those things, I would choose the AC15 and a handful of pedals, or maybe one of the 20-watt Friedman Marshall variants, pink tacos and all that kind of stuff. One of those ought to do you just fine. Just think Jimmy Page, but not as loud. More actually closer to Aerosmith for that kind of sound, for like the Bad Religion stuff. And Replacements is the same sound. You just don't tune your guitar first. Regarding specs, well, there are about 3 or 4 different ways to make a good buffer, and each one of them can be fine. Back in the day, I guess the epitome of a good transistor buffer would be what you'd find in a Pete Cornish thing. And there are a lot of bad transistor buffers, like you'd find in the Centaur, the Klon. I would just op amps are a good choice. I think the TC's is a surface mount op amp. But the real thing is just, hey, does it add noise? Hey, do I lose highs? Do I gain highs? Is it brighter with it? Is it darker with it? Does it sound the same? If it sounds the same, then the specs don't really matter so much as, this buffers, New York geology, the oranges are pretty well built. The issue of the oranges, as I say, is on all of them, they have really long pot shafts made of really cheap metal, and they tend to have split shaft pots with, that are supposed to take a knurled push-on knob, but they have set screw knobs, which really messes up the flimsy metal of the pot shafts, and they snap off if you look at them twice. Other than that, they're pretty well built for the price. But if you like the way it sounds, get one. Did I say procrastinator, or did someone else say it? I'll have to watch the stream back. Can I tell you how to set the solder iron with only a variable temperature control, but not a gauge to read the actual temperature? Well, not in an objective way. Can I? I mean, I can say, does the solder behave the way you expect when you solder with it, and then you're at the right temperature. If it's too hot, turn it down a little bit. If you're not able to flow solder easily enough, turn it up a bit. That's just a matter of trial and error. But if you're doing it a lot, get something that that has an accurate temperature control with a gauge. Hey Martin, it's how much current is my one power socket drawing? It's probably drawing anywhere from 2 to 10 amps, depending on how many amplifiers I have on it at a time. But it's going. It's got a 15 amp circuit breaker on it, and it's going into a 15 amp circuit breaker in the house. And I've never tripped either, so I've never had anywhere close to the max at one time. I tend not to have I may have 20 amplifiers here, but they're not all powered on at the same time. Rare for more than one or two to be on at the same time. Hey, Goody Guitars. I don't have any any other source for those. If you need a half round to get a full round and cut it in two, maybe. I don't know. Raquel Welch or Sophia Loren? Raquel Welch. But John Hogg has got the better answer there. Rita Hayworth is the correct answer there, randomly selected user. Absolutely. Rita Hayworth, I'll be in my bunk. I'll be procrastinating. I imagine the JCM 800 kit from Budgetone will be a copy of the vertical input, which is just the original 2204 1987 circuit, depending on how it's populated. No one's going to be wanting to do I don't think anyone's going to want to do a version of the post 83 horizontal input because there's just so many little strange changes that they made that were space saving as opposed to sound improvements. In fact, I can't think of any, and that would be described as a sonic improvement. So, yeah, the Mojitone 50-watt kit is going to be the vertical input. And there's nothing wrong with the horizontal input Marshall. If it's the 1983 or later 2204 or 2203, you just need to make sure that your pots and jacks have good solder joints every couple of years because they do vibrate. There's some stress on them, and you need to make sure you might want to play around with having an extra filter node added if you feel that there's a grittiness to the sound of the overdrive. Hey, Gooden. Well, yeah, that's one way to do it, unless you're a squirrel fan. I'm waiting for Victor's question to pop up here. Have I ever seen a Park 120? Park 1210 100-watt head? I don't recall. I had a Park in about 3 years ago. It's on the channel. It was basically Park's version of a Marshall Major, but I don't recall whether it was a 1210 or what. It was a beast and still is, and it's still one of the favorite amps of that particular player. Whom I need to call? I have not worked on any, let alone many WEM amps. I'd like to. There's just not a lot of WEMs in these parts. I'd like to try some, so I have more experience. Parks are cool, and I was, before life went sideways in some regards about a year and a half ago. I was gonna have Mitch Colby on here for technical difficulties, who owns Park Amps today. I think he still does. He did for a while, but he also does the Sun Dragon. I need to get him on here. I've got a lot of guys I need to get on here. I just haven't had time. But Parks, for those of you who don't know, Marshall had a distribution deal for the United States. So if you were in the U.S., Marshall could only sell through their distributor. And so they wanted to sell more amps through more music stores. So what they did was they came up with Park. So if you were the Martin distributor, you only could sell, not Martin. If you were the Marshall distributor, only this store in each town could sell Marshalls. But each town could also have a different shop that sold Park. So Marshall could sell more amps. And so a lot of the Parks were exactly the same amp as a Marshall, and some of them had slight variations. And I think Marshall did a period where they were doing some test ideas in the Park stuff to see anything that they wanted to bring over into a main one. And it used to be a kind of a secret that Parks were a great Marshall alternative, but I think that secret's been out for a long time. Well, she didn't do anything for Carrie. I think we're going to take our second intermission on that note. You guys need to think of some more amp questions when I get back, because I'm glad that you old people were able to dream about Sophia Loren, But real fast before we go, one of the things that I was joking with my wife about is it's so nice that women over 35 or 40 are being able to keep their careers these days. Because all my life, it's like Hollywood forgets about actors, female actors once they hit 30, and now they're able to continue. And that kind of chapter has pretty much faded because all of the world is telling me I should be so attracted to 19 to 24-year-old women. And that's wonderful. 19 to 24-year-old women are fantastic, but I'm too old to be trying to chase them, and we don't have anything in common to talk about. So, as I joked with my wife, we're watching some show, and a beautiful actor in her late 40s. I'm like, it's so nice to have age appropriate eye candy. On that note, we're going to take our next intermission. See you guys in 7. And we're back. Let's see. I see some stuff coming up that'll be fun to talk about. But let's get to the next question in the series. You take the blonde, I'll take the one in the toy bin. Whatever happened to train wreck amps? Well, Ken Fisher passed away, and so thus ended train wreck amps. Thanks very much sent to me. I always appreciate it. That's very kind of you. See, Aubrey Plaza versus Kat Dennings. That's a generational thing there. You're about 15 years younger than I am, so it makes sense for you. I think Aubrey Plaza would use you and spit you out, so go with Kat. But I think that Michelle gets the vote on that. All right, Mark. All right, tremolo grill. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what the measurements are in millimeters. Sorry, I don't know what the measurements for the grill are in inches either. I'd have to have one to measure. Replace the transformer, and the new one's got all those taps. Put a selector in the ground switch hole. Good. Should I rewire the negative feedback circuit to the 4-ohm tap or leave it on the jack socket? You should always have it connected to the 4-ohm tap like it was originally in the app. So no matter what load you have, the negative feedback stays consistent. Otherwise, you're going to have much more negative feedback if you have it connected to the output jack and then you switch to the 16-ohm tap. You're going to have a lot more current there, and your negative feedback will be too much, and the thing will oscillate. So yeah, tie the negative feedback to the 4-ohm tap on the switch. Good. I think that goes beyond having your eyes checked. You might need a sanity check. I think I saw Wonder Woman in 76 or 77, and I had early onset puberty. Oh my God. Anyway, I don't think that's what this channel needs to be about. But I can't just let that sit there like a turd on the table. T777 replaced pickups on a cheap Telecaster guitar, T-style guitar, and have been able to eliminate ground buzz. I plan to replace cheap electronics and rewire any tips or shielding paint. Not sure if good. Was it ground buzz or is it single coil buzz? Two separate things. This is a traditional wired T-style guitar with passive pickups, standard single coils, and it is properly grounded. And if I'm playing and I'm touching the strings, which are connected to the bridge, which are connected to the output jack, all the circuit ground, then there is no ground noise, but there still will be single coil noise if I'm on the neck or bridge pickup positions. 60 cycle hum is there. I can be in the middle position, be touching the strings, have no ground noise and no 60 cycle hum, and the damn thing's really quiet. It's also shielded. But with a shielded telly in the noiseless position in the middle, so no 60 cycle hum, if I take my hands off the strings, there will be some ground noise. If I did not have it shielded, it'd be that sound when you're not touching the strings. The shielding helps with that, but doesn't fully eliminate it. So I don't know what you're saying. Are you saying that you have ground buzz as in there's a loop, or ground buzz as in you touch the strings and it doesn't get quieter? So give us some more information. You have to have the bridge wire, bridge grounded. Typically, a Telecaster pickup does not have a separate ground wire run from the bridge to here. Typically, the negative lead on the bridge pickup is tied to here, and the negative lead on the bridge pickup is tied to the base plate for the bridge pickup, which is connected to the bridge with the 3 screws. And so the negative wire on the pickup is your ground connection for the entire bridge. On other tellies, you need to have a wire from the bridge because this is a floating. If it's like a 4 cable, that shield is not tied necessarily to the plate, the bridge plate, the base plate rather, on the bridge pickup. So that could be the cause of your issue. But it depends on the pickup you have and how it's wired. And make sure that you're describing the right thing beyond just buzz. Hey Nelson P, considering upgrading my Marshall DSL-20CR in the Framework JCM900 Studio, SC20, PRS HRDX, Freeman Runt, JJ Jr., or Orange Brent Hines Terror. Of those, take the two Marshalls off the list entirely. They're not very good for the price. They're okay at lower price points, but because of distribution deals, they're much higher price points than they should be. The Friedmans are fantastic choices. I don't have any experience with the Orange Brent Hines Terror. I've played the Dark Terror and the Tiny Terror. I'm not a big fan. The Friedmans are going to kill those. I've heard really good things about the PRS HDRX 20. I have not played one, not been inside one. The PRS amps I have been inside range from the quite good to the absolutely awful. I don't know where the HDRX 20 falls on that spectrum. I know that when that amp came out, 2-3 years ago, every YouTube guitar channel talked about how great it was and how everyone needed one and it was the only amp you'd ever need. And now, these many months and years later, none of those channels seem to be using that amp. So take that for what it's worth. Of the amps on that list, the two Friedmans are absolutely surefire winners. The Orange and the PRS are worth looking into, and avoid the Marshall if at all possible. Marshall has not made a great amp since maybe 1990. I think the Silver Jubilee, the original ones, was the last really great one they ever did. What are the best places to place grounds in a Fender amp? Hey Stanley, I've got videos on that. If you look at in my tech tips playlist, I've got or just do ground, search on my channel for videos with ground in the titles. I have ground schemes in general, ground schemes on Marshalls, and I have one video specifically on ground schemes in a Fender amp. And that covers most of the Fenders from the Tweeds through the late 70s. Yeah, I saw that someone's building amps, but we'll see. We'll see if they're really Trainwreck. Trainwreck was not really a brand so much as the thing that Ken put on the amp set that he built. And let's see if his friend is able to build them at the same level. Personally, I think it's much like the sequel to Spinal Tap. It could potentially damage the value of the brand. Hey Brad, what do I think are the audible differences with output transformers featuring grain-oriented steel laminations and or bifilar windings, if any? I do not have an opinion on that. I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of how transformers are made. I know which ones sound good to me and which companies have been good to work with and which companies have been reliable. But I would ask, if I had a question about that, I would call Joe Pampel, whom you also know, because he used to make obsolete electronics transformers. The knowledge of how to build a transformer, that's an entirely different field than what I know, and I do not know. So I phone a friend, and Joe would be the friend I would phone. Or I'd ask you. Hey, sent to me, thank you. Well, hey, what's your real name? I probably have you on my phone. I just don't know you as sent to me. It's proud to be a Memphian. Speaking of proud to be a Memphian, maybe you know her as well. I was watching the Memphis Drum Shops video, and they had Kim Trammell on this week. And Kim's been a friend of mine since we were 18, 19, both at University of Memphis. And it was so good to see her on that Memphis Drum Shop video. Let me put that up here for you guys real fast. If any of you like drums and want to know more about Memphis and what a greasy pocket is. So let me call up this video real quick because it was so damn good. And Kim Trammell has been a friend of mine for forever, and she's just phenomenal. And sent to me, I don't know what your Memphis name is, but hey, they got one with George Lawrence too. George is an old friend of mine. I need to hook up with George. Let's see, history. Anyway, Kim just killed it in this video, and she always does. She always does. But all right, copy. Y'all go watch this after this stream. Save this. And anytime I can help share the spotlight. That's what I'm here for. Madeline Kahn. Always too soon. All the amps that I've ever worked on, what is my most memorable worst amp ever, except Mesa? Well, I'm afraid even more than Mesa, given the price, and the price-praise ratio was not at all consistent with the reality. I think the worst amp I've ever seen, ever, has got to be that Lazy J20. It was just absolute unsafe shit. Should never have been sold to humans. Should have been illegal to sell for a number of reasons. And it was beyond that, it was just stupid. Everything about it was just dumb. I don't have it on the YouTube channel. That's before I started the YouTube channel. All my findings were on the old Facebook channel, the Facebook page, but they're still up there. Videos and photos and typings. But my experience pretty much mirrored Brad's. The one I had not burned out its power transformer yet, even though it would in time. The one I had multiple ground loops from the factory, and they'd implemented the variable voltage wrong, and they told people, hey, that noise is just part of it. No, it's not. I had to rebuild that. And they had theirs wired so if you use the variable voltage, the tremolos stopped working, or went thump, 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 thump. So I changed that as well. But it was like, you shouldn't have to do $800 worth of work to make a brand new $4,000 amp functional. Put the candle back. Hey, Wes, yeah, I do load line calculations, but I have learned the hard way that sometimes the calculation shows you a safe range, and then within that range is what sounds best. So I will often say, okay, I know that I'm going to be in this ballpark, and I want to be somewhere between, say, a 1K and a 3K on this cathode. And then once I figure out the gain response I want from that, then I'll, there are limited numbers of capacitors. So you may say, all right, if I use this with this 10 microfarad, it's going to be flat down to between, like, say, 30 hertz and 50 hertz. So that's a safe range. And if I want more low end less low end fullness, I might go down to a 4.7. But I know that I roughly am going to be in 1 to 3K, and then I'll just try those and see what feels the best. And then sometimes I will then say, all right, that feels the best. And let me redo the calculations based on what sounded and felt the best. Why? Is there anything in this math which tells me why? And it's an ongoing process. I'm not there yet. But yeah, I like to know the safe range to get the result I want. But you can't plan for, but you cannot approach things in such a way as to exclude happy accidents. For instance, the Soldano SLO 100, with that 39K unbypassed cold clipper in the cathode of that stage there. I read somewhere that Mike was trying a 3.9K and grabbed the wrong resistor. And he put it at 39K instead of 3.9K. And that may be apocryphal, but it makes sense because no one, in terms of designing a load line, would have said, I'm going to go to a 39K. They might have said a 47K or a 22K or some other more standard value. But a 3.9K would be a pretty typical thing to choose. And if you just grab the wrong thing, pop it in, they're like, whoa, that sounds great. The load line might not have led you there because you're going to look at the load line of that one circuit, that one triode by itself. That's not the actual behavior in the full context. And so the behavior of that triode and its load line in the full circuit is great, but the behavior of that triode as a triode, as a X comes in, Y comes out, that's a terrible, terrible choice. So you don't be so obsessed with calculations that you preclude the opportunity to discover something new. But at the same time, it's nice to know that, hey, this is the range, somewhere in this range is what I'm probably going to like. Is there a different sound from different caps in the guitar? I saw Gibson restuffing bumble caps just to make them look like the originals. There is the sonic differences in capacitors are caused by differences of capacitance and whether or not the listener / player is aware of what they look like and what they cost. So if I sell you a new set of bumblebees for $100 and install them in your Les Paul for another $100, you're going to swear up and down, those are the best sounding caps you've ever heard in your life because you just invested $200 in getting them. There's a reason that John Suhr uses little bitty film caps. There's a reason I use little bitty film caps for the most part, unless I need something for a physical layout where the span makes more sense to use a larger axial. If the capacitance is the same, the behavior in the circuit is the same. People pay crazy money for bumblebee caps for a clone of a 63 Gibson, or 63 Gibson had cheap ceramic disc caps. So did the 57 Strat, or I guess maybe not 57, but 63 Strat had a real cheap disc cap, the same cap that you'd find in a twin, and the LFO for the tremolo. As long as the capacitance is the same, and the voltage rating doesn't really matter, but the lead thickness does. The lead thickness correlates to voltage. So I don't want a lead that's so, I don't want to use a cap whose voltage rating is so low that the leads are flimsy and that it mechanically moves around. But you're not going to hear a difference in materials in a capacitor in a passive tone stack in a guitar. I have here, with the owner of the Amp's blessing, this 200 volt, 100 nanofarad cap from one of the Fender 64 Deluxe reverbs. I've got the 400 volt version on here somewhere, but this is the one I saw on my desk this morning, and it just came to mind. And I've got a 400 volt, 100 nanofarad MKT 1813, and I've got a 600 volt 1.2 nanofarad orange drop. This is the 6PS, so this is the polyester. This is a $2 capacitor. This is a $2 capacitor. Fender marks these up a crazy amount because they look kind of like the old Blue Ajax. I'm going to do a video at some point opening one of these up and show you that inside here is a generic, very generic film cap, metallized film cap that's much lower quality than this Vichy. And you can even see how the Vichy 400 volts is physically smaller than the Fender 200 volt, even though these are the same rating, 100 nanofarad. And inside this big blue box is probably a much smaller cap than this one, which is the actual capacitor is inside this, because you don't need to have a cap this big for 200 volts, but yet it is. So I'm going to cut one of these open in a video. Until then, don't overpay for one of these. Get one of these kind of things, and you have a much better capacitor for a lot less money. Thanks, John. Appreciate you. I always seem to be standing on a ladder when I return from breaks and forget I have the live in my headphones. Well, I have tried to do the, hey, and we're back before, but, I can't always be the amp whisperer. I'm going full circle to earlier in the chat. Let's see. Thoughts on the new AC10 hand-wired compared to AC15C? I have no thoughts on the new AC10 hand-wired because I've not seen one. When I see one, I'll have thoughts on it. I hope it's great. I hope it is. I always want new products to be fantastic. And I'm missing something from... Oh, okay. Yeah. Never mind. Hey, Bambi, had a local guy build a couple of output transformers for a 5F1 and 5V3. They both sounded horrible. I gave him the specs from Hammond, what else to specify to achieve acceptable results. Like I said earlier, I am not a transformer expert, but I know that there's a lot more to it than just the paper specs. It's how the things are interleaved and how many windings with what wire to achieve X result, how the wires are dressed in relation to each other. Talk to a transformer designer. I can tell I know when something is good quality, and I can do the research to do all that stuff, but I cannot pretend to know everything, let alone know everything. Pretending to know something is very different than actually knowing something. I can't do either. I don't have time. I barely know the stuff I know. Hey, Mark, back to the Vox. On the basis that Mullard mustard caps and WEMA TFFs are hard to get and very expensive, what should I use? Well, for some of my clients, they like it if I track down the old trophy foils, which are still available from eBay in Germany for the most part. But for others, that's not in the budget. And these WEMA 1813, MKT 1813s are fantastic in a Vox. I also use them in Fenders and Marshalls. I love these. If I need an axial film cap, this is my preference. This has been available for a long time on Mauser. Mauser's has not carried the entire range. CE distribution, which is also available to people as tubesandmore.com and antiqueaudiosupply.com, has the full range of these in 400 volt and 600 volt. 400 volt and 630 volt categories. This would be my recommendation. Now, if you're in the UK, what was the source? I used to have to order them from the UK as well. Was it Farnell? I think it was Farnell that had them, because for a long time I could only get these in the US from Mauser, and I had to order some values from the UK. I believe it was Farnell. But if you're in the UK, Google Vishay MKT 1813, and they are available in the UK. It's a German company that makes them for Vishay, I believe. So, but Mauser has them, but Mauser doesn't have all the values. Mauser doesn't stock all the values. But you might be able to get all the values necessary for an AC30 from them. Hey, Motor Amps. His Tweed Deluxe clone was on for 30 minutes without a speaker. After I plugged in, the speaker worked okay. Was it the transformer speaker output wiring that protected the amp? It was the speaker output wiring. Let me get a jack and show you. Now, remember what I said earlier. You cannot rely on this wiring to always save your bacon. But it is nice that it can. Now, notice he says the amp was on, not that he was playing at gig level volume with it off, because I know that someone would take what I said and say, hey, it's okay if it's on, and then install an effects loop in that 5E3, thinking that they can run a line out of the effects loop and record it, and then just have nothing connected to the speaker. That's when you can have an issue, even with this method. But well, never mind. For the first time in recorded history, I don't have a 12A on the bench, but on the Switchcraft 12A, there's a lug on the jack that connects a tip it connects to the tip when nothing's inserted. And if that's grounded, then when nothing's plugged in, the tip is going to ground. So that's what the fender does. You can see it on the schematic, but that's what saves your bacon there, motor amps. Hey Josh, what kind of amp do I need to make the Black Crowes kind of tone, like the Shake Your Moneymaker album sound? Well, I think they were mostly, Rich at least was using a 2550 Silver Jubilee at that time, but you can use almost any 80s Marshall to sound like that, the Shake Your Moneymaker kind of stuff. The main thing, I think, that was recorded by Brendan O'Brien, and that's more important than whatever amp is. They could have used an Ampeg V4 with Brendan O'Brien, had a great sound. They could have had, they could have done the whole album with a deluxe reverb and a rat pedal with Brendan O'Brien and had a great sound. But I know that Rich Robinson at the time was using the JCM 800 2550 or whatever Silver Jubilee, and was it Mark Ford? Is that the name of the lead guitarist on that first album? He probably was using that same amp and maybe some other 800 that the studio had. I don't know for sure, but that's the way to go for that. And you can get that with a lot of Marshall variants. Hey Adrian, he says, I live in an apartment with ungrounded electrical. Is there any safe way for me to use a tube amp? Thanks for everything. Jeff Cease, that's right, Jason Young. Jeff Cease. Sorry, I haven't thought of that name in forever. Adrian, not really. You can do what people did up before the United States had mostly grounded outlets, in which case you can use a Fender style ground lift circuit, which puts one side to chassis through a capacitor, which is also called the death cap, because if that cap fails as a short, you can have a live electrical chassis. But it is, maybe Brendan engineered it, Richard, but and then went into producing later. Anyway, sorry, got two different time zones at the same time. The way to do it as safely as possible. Now, it's not recommended, but in a pinch, if it's your only option in an apartment, would be to make sure, get a meter, and you have with a polarity switch, if your amp has this option to have a polarity switch, is to plug it into the wall. It's only going to be 2 prongs, so you plug it into the wall, and measure between the chassis and something which is earthed. And there, actually, in your situation, there may not be anything that's earthed, anything that's grounded in that apartment if nothing's grounded. So that won't work. Then the fallback is turn the amp on, listen to it, flip the switch the other way. Whichever way is quieter is the correct way, but it's not optimal. I should tell you not to use a tube amp in that situation at all, and in which case digital modelers make a lot of sense. The modeling pedal kind of thing, because you're doing much lower voltage. But if you were to have, I'll say, an old Fender Deluxe or Princeton, which had a ground switch, that would be the proper use, which is what people did in the 60s before the outlets were grounded. But just know that you are taking a risk with that. A little bit less of a risk than you would be if you were in an apartment where some outlets were grounded and some were not. Because then if you were not grounded and you touched something that was grounded, you could be messed up. Well, Richard says a 3-prong adapter with a ground screw plugged in. A lot of the old outlets in old houses and apartments would not have the metal box at ground. So you might, but first thing I would do is call the city, report electrical code violation, randomly selected user says. In a perfect world, sure. And not all cities actually enforce that. Yeah, T777's got the answer. Just crank the amp, you'll get evicted, and you get a place with a basic safety present anyway. There's no real good answer. Sorry. It's a buzz that goes away when touching strings, including middle position, much worse than my Strat or other Tele, both like... Okay. Well, then, if it goes away when you're touching the bridge, then it's wired correctly, but you may benefit from shielding the guitar properly. It could... You could also just have... sometimes you can just need to twist the leads on the pickups. Just twisting the leads gives a little bit of shielding to them. And make sure all your solder joints, are good. Because a bad solder joint will give you a noisy amp. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to burp on in front of you people. It will give you a noisy guitar. So Silver Jubilee is good. All right, 2525H, 2555A. I would not buy any of the reissue Jubilees because they're selling them at a high price and the inside of them is poorly built. I would either get an original run from 87 or the one that they did in the 2000s. I don't remember what that one was called. There may be the 2525H, I don't recall. Avoid the X, or get one of the Freeman variant. The Runt's is not close to the Silver Jubilee. If you really want the Silver Jubilee sound, I think the closest thing on the market, unless Dave Friedman's got something that I'm unaware of, is the Omega Lurkst amp, which is made by a company for Mojotone, which is the Alex Lifeson model amp, which is based on a 2555. But I think there's a premium price attached to licensing the Lifeson thing with Lurks. And I say that with great love for Lifeson, for Mr. Lurks there. But I think of the amps on the market today that are new, I think that the Lifeson Omega Lurkst is the closest thing to the old 2555 or other Silver Jubilee. But I don't know what the used value, the market price of an old one is. I don't keep up with the market. I can't. It's a whole other set of things to think about and remember. And I barely remember what I had for breakfast today. Friedman's got some great amps. I just don't know if he's got one that's specifically the 2555. But if you're going for the Black Crowes thing, you could get that with any 800 or 2204 and an overdrive pedal. Hey, Omelette Socks, when do you have to replace transformers? Extremely rarely. Extremely rarely. Most transformers never need to be changed. I may be running into problems on the output transformer on this 74 super bass, because if you saw the video on that the other day, someone had put a jumper wire between the B plus and the bias. So instead of the bias being like negative 50 volts, it would have been positive 400 to 450 volts. So the output tubes would have died. And the question we're about to find out is whether the output tubes died and a fuse blew before or after something bad happened to the output transformer. So my fingers are crossed that one stupid mistake did not kill the output transformer. That'll be the next video on that, where we find that out. But in general, transformers don't get replaced. Occasionally I'll find a bad power transformer. It's not very common in a quality amp. Occasionally I'll find a bad output transformer, usually caused because someone ran it without a speaker cable or the bias supply died. But it's not very common. Reverb transformers have begun to fail a little more commonly in 60s Fenders. I think that's probably due to bad reverb tanks. I think what happens in the sequence is that the reverb tank dies, and then the transformer, which is basically a miniature 8-ohm output transformer, has no load, and that causes the reverb driver transformer to fail, and that usually presents as an arcing. I've just noticed that more commonly in the last 10 years or so. But you won't hear a difference between an original reverb driver transformer and, say, the Habor version, and it's like a $30 transformer. Or same for the, well, I'd like to say same for the Hammond, but I had a Hammond replacement reverb driver that was completely wrong space, and did not match the specs on their website, and I was not very pleased with that. Hey, Eckhard, is it possible to achieve more headroom out of a deluxe reverb upgrading the output transformer? And has the deluxe reverb cab enough volume to use it as an open sounding 2x10 configuration? Yeah, you can use it. I would not use the. You cannot use the cabinet. You cannot change out the baffle and put two tens in. It won't fit. You could easily get an extension 2x10 cabinet for a different sound. Um, um, as far as achieving more headroom, I would not upgrade the output transformer. If you want to get more headroom out of a deluxe reverb, change the dropping resistors from 10K 10K to 4.7K 1K. You'll still sound like you'll sound like a tiny twin. You'll have much more preamp headroom. You won't lose anything. But that's one of the things Fender did to make the deluxe reverb not have as much headroom. And most players really like that lowered headroom in a deluxe reverb. But you could also, if you want more headroom, increase the output level of the amp. So don't change anything in the amp. Get an external 2x12 and run into that either instead of or in addition to the internal 1x12, because you're going to have more air moving from two speakers than one, or you could even have three speakers moving air, and a lot more internal volume in that cab. And then the same amp on three is a lot louder, and so that translates into headroom. Dan Steinhardt seems to like his Lazy J. Well, we'll see how he does with it. I'll talk to Dan about that at some point. I don't want to talk about Dan behind his back. Um, I, I, uh, it's not that he likes it and I don't. It's that his hasn't blown up yet, and the ones I've seen were designed to die. It's like, hey, this guy has backed his Pinto up into 18 gas stations and hasn't caught on fire yet. It's still going to happen eventually, you know. When I say something about the Lazy J, it's not like just my opinion, man. That's science and shit. So it doesn't matter at all what a non-tech thinks of an app when the issue is this safe? Is this going to operate correctly? Is this going to continue to operate? And when the thing is that wildly overpriced, it just gets insane. But if Dan sees this, he's welcome to get in touch with me. We'll arm wrestle for it. Come on, Dan. Any benefits to incorporating shielding screens or foil on old Vox cabs, like how Fender has a screen stapled to the inside of the cabinet? And if so, where would you put it? Yeah, it's totally worth it. For the, if you're talking on old Vox JMI, I wouldn't put foil shielding on it. I would go ahead and spend the money for some aluminum flashing, like I've shown, and I wouldn't staple it. I would use some spray adhesive. Mask off where you don't want the adhesive to go, spray it on there, and then put it on the foil and wait 5 minutes and put them together, and then that's really solid, and you'll have benefits. You just have to make sure that the foil is going to touch the chassis when it's all put back in place, the metal of the chassis. So the shielding will actually be shielding as opposed to a capacitive plate. Yeah, that's where I do it. Hey, randomly selected user. The guy that designed the original Fender EVH amps, is that James Brown who did the 5150 for PV, or a different guy for the Fender versions? Did all kinds of research into the Brown sound, and that lowered heater supply, 5.9 volts, had the biggest effect towards the Brown sound. Well, that's great. He's paid to say nice things about the thing. It doesn't change the core fact that the 5150, the Fender version, is really poorly designed, really poorly built. So the designer of that amp doesn't get a vote as far as I'm concerned, because there is no design worth. There's no admirable design in that thing unless, hey, how can we make something that will sell like hotcakes and cost us 25 cents where other amps would cost $1? So I don't admire that design. So I don't value the designer's input. unless he was just being forced by the accounting department against his better inclinations, in which case I feel for the guy, because that's not, no one wants to do bad work. No one wants to put bad work out into the world, but people do it all the time. But what is the Brown sound? Because it's not the sound that 5150s do. 5150s do not sound like the 6.8. I'm sorry, not 6.8. I said 6.8 because I just saw 5.92 on the screen. The 68 Marshall. And the 68 Marshall didn't even sound like the 68 Marshall from record to record. Are you a Women and Children First fan? Are you a Diver Down fan? I'm sorry. Are you a Van Halen 1 or Van Halen 2 fan? Because those are very different sounds. Now, that's all the same amp. Mostly the same speakers, except for the ones that probably died. The Unidyne mic might be the same mic, but they were recorded a year or two apart. So maybe the mic was in a different position by half an inch. Maybe the mic pre was a little bit hotter, a little bit colder. Maybe the master tape was biased differently. They sound, maybe it's in a slightly, 2 feet to the left of where they put it in the last time they were at Sunset Sound. There's too much variation. But aside from all that, the 1968 amp, in the condition it was in 1978, 1979, and 1980, being played by a young, focused Edward Van Halen, does not make any sounds that the Fender EVH can make, no matter what the heater voltage is. So it's like, what Corvette handles the most like a Porsche? None of them. I'm not saying that the EVH is a Corvette, but, bad analogy. Hey, sent to me. I usually use 20 gauge. I'll often use 22 gauge. Electronically, 22 gauge is more than sufficient, but a 20 gauge of the wire I like to use, which is a Teflon coated silver stranded wire, I find that 20 gauge has the properties of a stranded cable that I like, and that it has some flexibility and doesn't vibrate, but it is just stiff enough to have some memory to it, so I can do things with it that I would normally have to do with a solid core wire. Like if I want, like on an old Vox, if I want the wire to go up 1 inch, then come over 2 inches, then go down 3/4 of an inch and maintain that shape, the 20 gauge stuff will do that. The 22 gauge is too small. It doesn't maintain that shape. It's just floppy. Now there are places where that flop, that you're gonna find the natural curve is very good, and the 22 gauge version of the same wire is also something I use very happily. But in terms of controlling the lead dress and having a neat lead dress, I prefer the 20 gauge. It's also less prone to breaking at a solder connection if stressed. It's just physically stronger. Now, when I say a neat lead dress, I don't mean everything exactly parallel and then perpendicular to each other. I'm not trying to make something that looks like a Tron bike path. Things can have curves. I just want to have all the stuff on V1B over by V1B, and all the stuff at V1A over by V1A, and none of the stuff at V2B anywhere close to the stuff on V2A, if that makes sense. So, but it's not because of current, it's because of how I can dress it and whether it'll stay where I want it. Brad had a supposed Fender PO wax capped, paper and oil, for those who don't speak post office, pulled the lead a little too hard, and an unbranded ceramic fell out of the wax. People are rock chewing dumb, man. Well, we will find out what's in this one, and I've got a couple of the others from this series, I think, laying around somewhere. And I imagine that much rock chewing will result. Diana Rigg and Barbara Feldman. I'll definitely be in my bunk. Oh, Max. I have no idea whether Splunk cabs are any good. I imagine that they are. Hate paying premium for old Marshall crap. Well, some old Marshall crap sounds great. So I can't tell you. I imagine Splunk makes good cabs, but I've not tried any. Any benefits from using shielded wire for the DC signal from plate to tone stack? I've never found any. I've never found any. DC typically does not need or benefit from shielding. AC definitely does. So I typically only use shielded cable for DC connection. I'm sorry, AC signals going to grids. All right, so that's right. Draculius was the producer. Brendan O'Brien was the engineer, and then later Brendan went in to produce everything. Sorry, yeah, but the point remains: if you want to sound like that record, get recorded by Brendan O'Brien. As far as I'm aware, George Draculius is the kind of producer who spends his time producing on a phone call, whereas Brendan O'Brien is an engineer who also produces. There's nothing against Draculius. Draculius, but Brendan O'Brien is one of the great engineer producers of that generation, of that era. Let me just say this about that man from that channel. I saw him. I saw this man who presents as an expert, showing he was doing it backwards because he's left-handed. He was showing how to intonate a guitar, and so he would take the string and hit the 12th fret harmonic, and if the harmonic was sharp, he'd move the saddle back, and if the harmonic were flat, he'd move the saddle forward. So that's what I think about that channel. It is really easy to be a presence on YouTube in the guitar world, or pretty much any niche world, if you have a good personality and you have good lights and a camera, and especially if you make relationships with brands, the brands send you stuff to review. Most reviews should be labeled as product demonstrations, not reviews. There's a difference. And there are people who get out of their lane. I'm not going to talk to you about how to improve your legato playing. I'm not going to tell you about how to incorporate 5/7, in your riffs. That's what Leon Todd is for. I'm not going to tell you how to play blues more effectively. That's what Jeff McErlane is for. I am going to talk about amps, and to a smaller degree about guitars, and to a smaller degree about pedals and stuff, and how you can use these things to your advantage and things to watch out for it, all that, because that's my lane. And when I talk about music, it's because I'm interested in it. I am, a player, not a player like Jeff or Leon, but, if I say, hey, not only kind of that's kind of stuff, but like, hey, you want to know if your filter cap's maybe a little bit sour? Do this. Yeah, I'm doing it without the personality or appearance myself, Ted. That's why I have to have a really good camera, because I can't do the stunning good looks. Man, I wish I had modern day camera and 10 year ago me. I was looking so much better 10 years ago. Some health things came up, and I've put on way too much weight, and I had the tooth thing during COVID. I was looking good there for a while, back when no one could see my face, and now that I'm every fucking pore. Oh man, no, Brad, we love seeing your face. You look like a combination of a happy little leprechaun and Gimli. We like you. Let's see, we're reaching the end. I'm gonna try to make sure I haven't missed any questions or any super tests. Yeah, Adrian, for practice, I've got the HX Stomp. I've got the Neural plugin for Logic. I've got the Tonex. I've got the Tonex Logic stuff, man. So late night, when my wife's asleep, I don't plug into, say, that 58 basement that's right there. I don't even plug into that 66 Princeton that's over there. I plug into the computer, but I'm not trying to play live for that. So I'm not running a lot of stuff. So I don't have to deal with a lot of latency. We're gonna get there where we can plug straight in with plugins and not have any latency. But if that's what you need to do for your apartment, that's what you need to do for your apartment. That's fine. It's all about your musical ideas. As long as the latency is minor enough that it's not inhibiting you from enjoying playing, which it shouldn't be if you're just running a few things. Let's see. Make sure I haven't missed any. When is part two coming of the Marshall? Well, the last 2 days I've been working on the front porch so I can get that done for Nikki, so that she doesn't change the locks. So I told her I'd get it done by the end of this weekend. Part two will be coming soon. I've got to figure out whether I'm going to film the process. Part two is the next step on this amp. Is I'm going to unpiggyback all the piggyback components, measure them before and after to see what they were chasing, and then I'm going to lift the board up, do some basic tests on the output transformer just to rule out dead shorts and stuff. And I'm very confident I'm going to find some severe damage on the bottom of the board in the area between the HT connection point and the bias connection point. And I expect that those traces will be really gone daddy gone in those areas. So what I think I'm probably going to have to do for the rectification and for the bias is install little turrets instead of maintaining the PCB there. I'm going to have to do some little turrets. And the question is, can I just put in the turrets where the holes in the pads were, or is there any because of the short that was in that area, is there any charring, any conductivity in the board? I need to rule that out so I know how to fix that area going forward. So we're probably going to have turrets there. It's late enough in this stream. I don't think I'm giving away any big spoilers. And then I need to make sure the output transformer is still good. So that's going to be part two. I'm going to figure out if I'm going to have the time to film that process or just show, hey, this is what I was doing, this is what I was checking. It's a combination of pressures there. Hey, Sonny, you got the 68 Super Reverb Drip Edge, black lines on silver panel. Heard it identifies the amp as a black phase circuit. Is that true or false? There's electronically, there's no difference between a 67, 66, and a 68. The electronic changes didn't really come in until very late 69. The only difference between your 68 and a 66 is that your 68 has got the silver face panel with probably with the drip edge around the baffle, and you're going to have two vertical lines most likely on yours. And other than that, yeah, you've got a drip edge. It's the same as the 66. They hadn't brought in electronic changes yet. They just started doing the cosmetic changes. Let's see. What's the best steakhouse in Memphis? It's a tough one. If you don't cook, probably Folks Folly. Ruth's Chris was terrible. I tried that once. There's another place I've not tried because it's a very expensive proposition, and I tend to just buy the best steak I can afford to buy. Sometimes I'll buy it from the butcher shop that they have in the back of Folks Folly and then go home and cook it myself because I know that I can get it right. I do a reverse sear, and I get consistently good results. But yeah, if you're looking for a steakhouse experience in Memphis, then a place called Folks Folly would probably be the best choice. There's one other place I've not tried. Like I said, it's out on Poplar, diagonally across the street from Ruth's Chris. But it seems to be like Ruth's Chris, a place that's really made for anniversaries, and business expense accounts. If you know, it's not the kind of place you go because the food's good. It's the kind of place you go to show off how much money you have. Folks' folly is towards that, but not fully there. But if I want a steak, I've set too many steaks back at expensive steakhouses for my wife would want to see me order a steak in public, so I'll make them myself. Now, if I'm in New York or Chicago or New Orleans, no problem at all. Man, I need to next time I go to New Orleans, I need to treat myself to Delmonico's again. There are places to get great steak. Memphis, better to roll your own, so to speak. Let's see. All right, I'm just trying to make sure not missing anything crucial. 22 gauge heater wiring on your super reverb. Hey, this is a crucial question. In general, on a super reverb, you want to have 18 gauge for the 6L6s. Then I would do. You could probably do 22 gauge from after the 6L6s, going to all the preamp, all the stuff on the 12X7s. But 22 gauge is probably demonstrably too small for the 4 6L6. Sorry, for the 2 6L6s in there. You could probably get away with 20 gauge on the 6L6s, but 18 gauge it doesn't cost much more. It's not harder to use. Use 18 gauge for the 6L6s, then you go to 22 for everything else. It'd be fine. I lost 20 viewers when I picked up the telly because I was showing about the because I picked up a telly because I was showing how intonation doesn't work. All right. Hey, David. I said that my favorite basement head is the AA864 power amp with the AB165 preamp. This applies to the bass channel for guitar use. Yeah, both channels. It keeps everything that you like about the preamp. It just lowers all the self noise. And there's one other change I make in terms of how the preamp nodes are wired, and it's real simple. On V3's plates on the stock amp, there's a yellow wire and a blue wire, and each plate 100K is separate. And I'm trying to remember which one's yellow, which one's blue. Either way, it's real simple. If you're looking down on the amp, and the amp's upside down, so the tubes are facing down, they're close to you, and the pots are here. There's 100K here and there's 100K here. The one on the left, lift that and redo it so that it's going to this connection on the right. So instead of having them like this, well, I'll do it like this. So if you're looking at the amp, they're like this. This is the one that's on your left. Instead of it going to its own wire, run it diagonally to there, and that moves them both to the same preamp node, because this point here is being mixed electronically with a DC mixer with the output of the other channel. And if in stock form they're on two different preamp nodes, but then you're mixing them and you're mixing two different preamp nodes, you get a lot of artificial noise that way because you're doing a DC mixer and you're also uncoupling a coupling cap stage, which undoes one of the filter caps in the amp. So if you move that resistor over like that, then you're mixing two things DC that are on the same node, and you're not undoing the decoupling of the amp. I know that I've repeated this a lot in different videos, but I never know who's seen what video or when they're going to get this information. And so, I mean, these are the kinds of things that can really make a big deal. So I don't want someone to say, "Oh, yeah, Abe made the output into AA864. It's still buzzy. What's the deal?" That one resistor move is pretty important too. Thank you, Diego. I appreciate that. And also you, Adrian. I appreciate all the kind thoughts there, including the liars saying that I'm a good-looking motherfucker. I just have the shallow depth of field, which really helps. I'm not sure if I like this lens for this. I got this is the 16 mil, which is 24 mil full frame equivalent on this camera. And I bought this to give the bench shot like you saw in the Marshall video the other day, and it gives a nice wide view for the bench. But when you trouble with the 24 equivalent, and I'm this close, is it exaggerates. I have the giant hand thing because it does so much foreshortening, which means that I can do this and lose a lot of weight because my head looks big and my body looks small. But if I forget and I lean back, I become Gut Man. I am Gut Man. So neither of them are quite realistic, but I'd like you to think this one is. So I may go back to, I was running 27 to 30 mil equivalent before and all the other ones. I think that's probably a little bit better. This makes my room feel a lot bigger. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think? This view or the previous one? This one's a bigger view of the room. The lighting is the same with either one. And the clarity of the lenses are almost the same. This one's a little bit sharper lens than the zoom. I don't know if you guys even think about this stuff, or if anyone even noticed the difference. I sweat all the small stuff. Hey, Lucas Polinsky. We're going to make this the last question because we're already a little bit over. Do I know the mods that Cesar Diaz did SRV amp? He would sound great through anything. What do I think of Jeff Healy, a great Canadian artist? Jeff was great. I'm very sorry that we lost him so young. He was a great player. Diaz is a highly overrated tech because he was playing with an insanely great player. I've had a Diaz amp come in, and things that were making contact to ground had paint between the surfaces, so the ground was not being made. They're just terrible amps that were made. I don't know whether he made them or they're made by people in his name, but But the basic thing is, on some of Stevie Ray's amps, they beefed up the transformers. So they take like a vibroverb and put a twin output transformer in it. Other things, Stevie Ray wanted to have all the tone knobs on 10, which is a great way to make an amp sound terrible. And so Diaz would wire them up so that the amps on 10 would still have the resistive value inside of the knob on 5.5 or 6. So some tech hiding of Stevie Ray, of course, which then just made Stevie Ray more inclined to believe that the knob sound best with the tone knobs on 10, because if you turn the tone knob down from 10, then you're going to be turning the tone knob down to like 2. Stevie Ray was a great player and a great soul and a beautiful songwriter, not a technical man. So I think Diaz kept Stevie's stuff going, and Stevie certainly punished his amps. But I think if Stevie had a better amp tech, his stuff would not have been going out as much, so it would not have needed as much work constantly. So it's a push me pull you there, where if you only fix the amp so much, then 6 weeks later you have to fix the same amp again. I'm not supposed to say these things. I'm supposed to say, oh wow, he had all those articles in Guitar Player. He must be. I thought he was a very lucky tech who was doing work for one of the great players of our time. That does not mean he was a great tech. I have to be honest about these things. I don't mean to be unkind, but anyway, we're going to get out of here. Richard, good luck with your cataract corrections. I hope everyone has a good week. Has a good week end for those that apply, and for those of you out suffering in the heat like I am, drink a lot of water and stay out of the sun, unless you want to look like me, all tanned and cool.